support from all sort of support, including the technical one from the center, the school center for the School of Studies, um, Gender, Culture, and Media, West Bengal State University, India. That is also houses Doris Lessing Society, South Asia. Our first session is going to be a very special session with our invited keynote speaker, Professor Elisabetta Marino from Rome. And the session will be chaired by Professor Ahmad Asanuzaman, who is Professor, Department of English in Independent University, Bangladesh, Dhaka. So over to Professor Asanuzaman. He is one of the core members of Doris Lessing Society, South Asia, one of the key members from Bangladesh. So over to Sir.
Uh, Thank you and welcome everyone to the second day of the webinar titled The Quest for Home, Women in the World, Not a Feat, jointly organized by Doris Lessing Society South Asia, North Africa, and also the Center for Gender, Culture, and Media, West Bengal University, uh, West Bengal State University, Barasat. Well, those of us who were present yesterday, we witnessed kind of a lively evening. It was wonderful. That is, our students, our colleagues, friends from different parts of the world putting in their efforts, best efforts, I would say, and made it a wonderful evening. So it was more than 3 hours, but none of us got exhausted, tired, even after a long day's work. So today, I hope it's going to be another enthralling session, enthralling day, as we have participants once again from across the world. And the first session is going to be Elisabetta Marino, and it's good morning to Elisabetta, right? Well, your smile tells it. It's the beginning of the day.
Yes.
So I will not introduce Elisabetta now. I would do that later because I'm waiting for others to join. So I would rather request Elisabetta to begin his paper and hope others will join and we'll be able to have an interaction later. So if it is all right.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I am extremely happy and honored to be here. And I really want to thank the organizers, my good friend Budeina, for this very kind and appreciated invitation. So thank you. So without further ado, I will start delivering my paper, which is on the subject of otherness, in a story that I selected because it is connected with Italy and a very important icon for Italian people and Italian immigrants as well, the figure of the Black Madonna. So, in the preface to her 1964 collection of African stories, Doris Lessing underlined the significance she attributed to short story writing and the pleasure she derived from crafting such narratives. She further reinforced her commitment to this literary pursuit by affirming that even if the only home for her stories were a private drawer due to the limited marketing opportunities, she would persist in writing them. Notably, within the same preface, she also placed a strong emphasis on one particular story, The Black Madonna, first published in Winter Tales 3 in 1957. As she declared, in fact, and I quote, "I am addicted to the Black Madonna, which is full of the bile that, in fact, I feel for the white society in southern Rhodesia, as I knew and hated it," end quote. This short story not only exemplifies one of the writer's recurring themes, namely racism and the fight against the scourge of apartheid, but also elucidates our belief that the inability to embrace otherness and acknowledge the interconnectedness among fellow creatures lies at the heart of cultural, social, ethnic, and gender imbalances. And I quote, "While the cruelties of the white man towards the black man are among the heaviest counts in the indictment against humanity, color prejudice is not our original fault, but only one aspect of the atrophy of the imagination that prevents us from seeing ourselves in every creature that breathes under the sun." End quote. Through a close reading of The Black Madonna, my paper sets out to explore the way Lessing tackles the theme of otherness and debunks myths of superiority, whether rooted in race or gender. The African context proves highly meaningful for this analysis since, beside being profoundly impacted by multifaceted inequalities, it, quote, "gives you the knowledge that man is a small creature among creatures in a large landscape," as the writer herself noticed in the above-mentioned preface. In The Black Madonna, like in most of our African stories, Lessing consciously adopts a writing style she herself views as masculine, being straight, broad, direct. Conversely, a feminine kind of writing is intense, careful, self-conscious, and mannered. These are the two forks of a road, according to the author. In so doing, as Claire Hanson has pointed out, she deliberately quotes attempts to enter the field of male discourse, male history, and male power, unquote, in order to expose, challenge, and subvert male power dynamics. Set in fictional Zambezia, which mirrors southern Rhodesia, the plot revolves around the evolving relationship between the Italian Michele, a former prisoner of war, and Captain Stoker, a British officer assigned to oversee Michele's work. Given his diverse skills in bricklaying and painting, Michele has been entrusted with building a simulated German village in a remote area, which is quite a bizarre pursuit. Its spectacular destruction would serve as entertainment for the bored white upper class, while aiming at offering some glimpse into the reality of war. And I quote, "Headlines in the newspaper were not enough. And in order to bring it all home to us, they planned to destroy a village by shell fire before our very eyes." So, in this very strange attempt, the very meaning of war, the very significance and the very tragedy of war is mocked and somehow deflated by the white people who are bored, who don't leave the war because they are far away, but they want to experience the thrill of it. And so they stage this kind of fake destruction. Zambezia is depicted as, quote, "rough, sunburned, virile, positive." A positive country where arts supposedly cannot flourish, given the intimate connection between creativity and broader societal values such as liberty, fraternity, and the rest. So in Zambezia, art cannot exist. This masculine, culturally starved land is inhabited by law-abiding military men, their seemingly insignificant wives who are doubly alienated from African life, as Haider al-Musawi has observed, due to their narrow-minded British identification and gender, and a vast nameless majority of Africans, which in the text they are called hordes of African laborers. They have no name, they have no face, they're just hands that work and work and work. Through their incessant toil, the latter group ensures the leisure of the white minority. At the outset of the narrative, Captain Stoker perfectly embodies the stereotypical British colonist in Africa. He is blonde and, quote, stiff and shiny in his laundered khaki. This idea of cleanliness as against the dirt of the place. His cold eyes are, quote, small and blue and angry, end quote. His mouth is narrow. His large hands resemble bristle-covered steaks, end quote. Readers gather that the grand blonde officer, the way he's called in the narrative, is a disciplined man. This is the adjective that Doris Lessing uses at the beginning of the story. Despite the double life he leads, jealous of his wife, whom he treats like a possession, in truth, he is afraid of her. And I quote, "She was a scornful creature, gay and hard, who laughed at him." Incapable of real affection, unable to establish a genuine connection between equals, Captain Stoker can only indulge in extramarital sexual affairs with abused native women, who are forced to please him given their subaltern position. Nadia is his favorite bushwife. His meaningless and worthless world, epitomized by the stimulated village and its anticipated destruction, is ultimately undermined by Michele. Joseph da Crema has argued that Michele's function in the story is to provide emotional salvation to Captain Stoker. Through the use of Christological imagery, in fact, Michele is allegedly endowed by Lessing with a redemptive power, is like a savior for Captain Stoker. It could be added that Michele is the name of the archangel who leads the army of God, a detail suggesting the character's symbolic role in waging war against futility and prejudice. Indeed, as the narrative proceeds, he forces Captain Stoker to adopt fresh perspectives, albeit only for a short period, but he does that. And he forces him to contemplate different points of view. Michele holds a liminal position and seems to have access to multiple worlds. He is both white and therefore belonging to a privileged minority, and a prisoner of war, an internee released after Mussolini's surrender, but still prevented from returning home by the ongoing conflict. So he has access to both worlds, and be it said incidentally, Italians, especially Italians from the south of Italy, were perceived, even in America, as Africans. They were not considered fully white. They didn't display the correct shade of white on their body and face. He is also an artist who employs his paintings to foster new ideas of communion, solidarity, and equality. The transgressive frescoes which decorate the church in the prisoners' camp feature, and I quote, swarthy peasants gathering grapes from the vintage, beautiful Italian girls dancing, plump, dark-eyed children, and amid crowded scenes of Italian life appeared the Virgin and the Child, smiling and beneficent, happy to move familiarly among the people. So this is another strategy that Lessing uses to undermine hierarchies, because the Virgin and the Child, they move among normal people. They are not above. They are together with people. They are as if they were normal people. When he is commanded to build the bogus village, he refuses to exploit African helpers, with whom, on the contrary, he sings and dances, harmonizing, and this is the verb used by the author, with them. And this is something that gives an attack of nausea to Captain Stoker, because Michele, he's white, and yet he mingles with the black people. He dances with them, he eats with them, he drinks with them. And this eating and drinking, this bread and wine that are mentioned in the text, somehow are reminiscent of the Holy Communion, of the Last Supper, of an idea of solidarity and brotherhood among people, which knows no borders. Michele visibly enjoys life, and he is not concerned with appearances, and therefore is completely different from the captain. He is indifferent to the way he is stereotypically addressed and depicted. In the text, Lessing explores all the stereotypical representations of Italian people. Italians were called bloody wop. WAP stands for without papers, without passport, especially in the American context. Italians are called bloody Kafir, fattish, olive-skinned little men, little Italians. This idea of little and belittling Italian people is recurring as a stereotype in the text. Michele is not in the least intimidated by the officer, who finds him in this position. He is in rolled up trousers, an uncolored shirt, unshaven, mildly drunk, with a bottle of wine standing beside him on the earth. So the description of the captain clashes against the description of Michele, who is absolutely the opposite, the reversal of the captain. When Michele's loyalty is tested, and quite humorously, the prompt construction of the fake village is regarded as unquestionable evidence of loyalty, Michele replies that he is not interested in defeating the Germans, but is interested in the end of the war. So he doesn't side with anybody. He only wants the war to end, which will allow him, this end of the war will allow him to return to his mother country and reunite with his beloved wife. So Michele looks at the essentials of life. He's not fussed. He wants to live and be happy and enjoy the small pleasures of life with his wife and children. As the narrative unfolds, Captain Stoker is increasingly enthralled by his, quote, savage speaking, and longs to prolong what he defines as a holiday from himself. a liberation from the castrating constraints of his shallow life. So somehow the contact with Michele is refreshing from the captain. He begins to think differently outside the box. He is even caught by some high-ranking officer while shamelessly singing and dancing with Michele, something that he had never done in his life. His previous pristine appearance thoroughly spoiled, and I quote, "The captain's shirt was open down the front, and there were stains on it. And he doesn't care because he lives happily." And it's very interesting that when Michele finishes his work and his construction of the bogus village, Captain Stoker asks for 3 more days with him. And these 3 days somehow are reminiscent of Christ's resurrection after the death. Nonetheless, the image of the Black Madonna, the ancestral mother surrounded by black angels and black saints, that Michele paints on the walls of the simulated church in the phony village proves too much for him. So this blackness and this female icon of power is too much for the captain, who still can't overcome all the lines. Let's delve a little bit more into the image of the Black Madonna. As Edvige Giuntes highlighted, American authors of Italian descent have often drawn on vernacular traditions. They have blended Catholicism with old and new mythologies as a vehicle for self-exploration and artistic affirmation. Remarkably enough, Italian-American artists and intellectuals have not been drawn towards the sorrowful, silent, meek, and selfless image of the Mater Dolorosa, emulated by so many domestic angels appeased in their ancillary position. Quite the opposite, they seem to have deliberately elected as their collective and individual protective icon an ancient, potent, and enigmatic female figure whose curious and puzzling color seems to correspond to the dark complexion of the newcomers from Sicily or Calabria, who exhibited on their faces a different kind of white than those of the dominant Anglo-Saxon culture, in the words of Fred Gardefee, and therefore resisted assimilation, or, as one may be tempted to define it, annihilation into the melting pot. Something similar may be detected in Lessing's short story. The powerful Black Madonna defies every hierarchy, subverts every stereotypical perception. The narrative ends in a crescendo of anguish and pain. It is decided that the captain's unaccountable behavior is the result of some strange and obscure illness, and therefore is promptly hospitalized and placed under the close observation by a nurse. The captain succeeds in escaping to save Michele, who is about to get killed during the air raid, since he refuses to leave the Black Madonna and everything she emblematically stands for. Michele is rescued, but the painting, which he manages to break off the wall, is emblematically, symbolically despoiled. In the very last pages of the story, Michele visits Captain Stoker, who is still in hospital, and gives him another painting of the Black Madonna as a present, as a memento of the old good times they shared, calling the officer my friend. So this Black Madonna, this new Black Madonna that he paints, is a token of friendship and is the emblem of this powerful bond that they established in this remote place, which was not tainted, apparently at least, by hierarchies, by stereotypes, by racial biases and asymmetric relationships. Lessing's conclusion, however, is rather bitter. Incapable of fully embracing difference, Captain Stoker stares in dread and disgust at the black figure, who smiles at him from the canvas with, at least this is how he perceives the female figure in the painting, half innocence, half malice. This image serves as a reminder of his exploitative relationship with his bushwives, relationships he intends to resume as soon as he is discharged. So this Madonna is, on the one hand, innocence, but on the one hand, he reads in her eyes malice, because this malice mirrors his own malice, his own exploitative attitude. So by refusing that meaningful gift, by treating Michele with contempt and repulsion, Lessing signifies the impossibility of bridging divides, of overcoming the invisible barriers that still affect modern-day Africa, leaving aside the Africa of the 1950s or the 1960s. Yet, the very last sentence, which betrays a more maternal, inclusive, emotional side in the captain, probably the outcome of the fruitful grafting with a culture different from his own, suggests some hope, thus showing the potential for positive change or growth despite previous barriers. And I would like to conclude with the very last sentence of the short story. And I quote, "He turned his face to the wall and wept. But silently, not a sound escaped him for the fear the nurses might hear. But these tears are extremely meaningful. These tears signify a female side in this virile, masculine, shallow world and the possibility of a positive change." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, Elizabeth. It was really nice listening to you. The way you tried to, place Black Madonna in the perspective of listening studies, that was really, something special. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.
Well, I didn't introduce Elizabeth because there were fewer participants at the beginning, but I think it's time I introduced her. She is as a professor in the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
And she has authored 4 monographs, a volume on the figure of Tamerlane in British and American literature, which is published in 2000, and an introduction to British Bangladesh literature. That's wonderful. Bangladesh literature.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading it. So it was published in 2005, and then a study on the relationship between Mary Shelley and Italy, published in 2011, and an analysis of the romantic dramas on a mythological subject, published in 2016. Elisabetta published the first Italian translation of poems of Maria Meggiuti, Zellan, in 2006. She co-edited 12 collective essays, collection of essays, and a special forum of Journal of Transnational American Studies in 2012. She also co-edited a special issue of the Journal of Postcolonial Literary and Gender Studies, and that's a recent publication. It appeared in 2022. And she has just translated the novel entitled Parkwater by Ellen Wood. She has published extensively on the English romantic writers, especially Mary Shelley and P.V. Shelley, Indian diasporic literature, travel literature, and Italian American literature. And she has been teaching both English and American literature for over 20 years. And she is the chair of the International Research Network, Global Network of Liberal Arts, and a member of the steering committee of the International Research Network Challenging Precarity, a global network. So I don't think it's enough, but since I should stop there. I know that there is no Q&A for this special show, but if someone wants to just say a few words, I think Ratna has raised her hand.
And also I'd like to say something if possible, yeah.
All right, so maybe we can spend 5 minutes, Sati, is that okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Yes. Dr. Anis.
All right, okay, thank you. Elisabetta, that was really wonderful. So I have actually some comments to make. If you don't mind, I have a question. So the first thing that you said, something that really triggered, triggered my curiosity. I worked in the United States of America with someone whose name is Francesca Porian. She's Italian, and she wrote a dissertation on how American women, are perceived in the American imaginary. Okay, and actually, what I found really interesting that you mentioned this is that. The way the American public at that time, during the 19th century or 20th century, with the big waves of migration, the perceptions were actually more than complex. What I meant by this is that they were not only seen as a subhuman African version. Do you know what I mean? And I think part of the reason I'm saying this is that I think, and you may tell me, I think you are the expert in this, is that. Italian people in America were perceived as, this kind of subhuman which touches on the Africanness, but at the same time, in that kind of subhumanity, there's a lot of, intricate richness, for example, they think of Italian people, they say, for instance, mafia, or they say pasta, or, all of those, associations, bathing, so what can you tell us about this? And my question is the following. So I really loved your focus on the Black Madonna. And if you want to be racist, people use a discourse including religion, right? And I think by choosing the Black Madonna as black-skinned, we are, I think, unsettling, this kind of hierarchy of preferences like white over black, blah, blah, blah. So with this kind of symbolism, in a very shattering way, how can we explain, this with the Lessing style, which is masculine, and you said that, by choosing a masculine voice in the narrative, in a way it does inform and confirm. At the same time, how do you bridge this with the fact that the Black Madonna as a symbol does, in a way, detract or unsettle this line of, hierarchies, white over black, blah, blah, blah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful question. I think that this is a strategy that the author uses. She appropriates the masculine voice in order to unsettle it through the use of this image, this powerful female image of the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is an extremely powerful icon, also because she is reminiscent of a time before history.
Okay.
She's prehistorical in the sense that she was, and she is before the time men began recording history. So she is the most powerful image, and for this very reason, also Italian Americans, when they traveled, when they emigrated, used this image of the Black Madonna as a self-empowering tool. Because, there is a whole tradition of bleaching Black Madonnas. I don't know whether you're aware of that. This has been something that has fascinated me for decades. The fact that male hierarchies considered the Black Madonnas as a mistake or as something that had occurred because of the weather, because of the ashes from the candles. So Black Madonnas were actually whitewashed, okay? But
Because we speak
yes,
of
by men, obviously, by men. Whereas they were reminiscent of a much more powerful symbolism. They were connected with the cult of the soil, of the earth, of this generative cult of the mother figure with matriarchy. And that's the reason why by appropriating the male voice, she then subverts it, Dory Lessing subverts it through the use of the Black Madonna. So I thought that it was some kind of touch of genius on the part of the writer.
Thank you so much,
Well,
Elizabeth.
thank you
That
so
was so insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Otinia, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Elisabetta, for this wonderful talk. I'm not surprised that's you. So, you've said something that summarizes the whole spirit of this conference, but also that summarizes what Lessing, the way Lessing wanted us to see the world. You've mentioned the image of the Virgin being together with people, not above.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exactly the title of our conference, taken from Idris Sheikh, who inspired Gareth Lessing, in the world, not of it. This is a very beautiful image, and thank you for underlining this. Thank you, Elisabetta.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so I think we can finish here, and Elisabetta has set the tone of today's proceedings, and we look forward to another exciting day. So with that, I hand it over to Shati, to you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Hassanuzzaman, for chairing it so wonderfully. Thank you, Professor Elisabetta Marino. That was a splendid paper. We are waiting to, read more from you and more on Lessing also, maybe. However, we have to go on to the next session, which is the third business session of this webinar, and we call it Lessing Through the Many Lenses of Theories. It is to be chaired by a dear friend, Dr. Hanan Baroumi, Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, University of Tunis, Tunisia. We heard Professor Baroumi's fantastic paper last evening, and today she is going to chair a session which will have three young professors presenting their takes on different aspects of Lessing through different theoretical apparatus. Thank you, and over to Professor Haneni. Professor Baroumi. And the The speakers are there. They have joined.
Okay, thank you, Swati, very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure both to participate in the panel, of course, with our guests, and also to welcome you to this business session 3, titled Lessons Through the Many Lenses of Theories. And here we have participants who are going to examine Lessing's work in relation to history rewriting, maternity in and out of homes, and last but not least, offer us some eco-feminist experiences and reading. So I'm wondering if we have Dr. Chandra Mathan with us.
Good evening, ma'am. Yeah.
Hello. So the Dr. Chandra Mathan, she's an assistant professor in English from Bodoland University, Kokarajar, Assam, India. Just a minute. Okay, so yes. It is, yeah. So she has been working in the Department of English, Bodoland University, for the last 12 years. She has published a number of articles in reputed journals. Her areas of interest are comparative literature, translation studies, and Indian writings in English. Presently, she has involved herself in dealing with research oriented on memory studies, disability studies, film studies, eco-criticism, eco-poetry, new historicism, and trauma studies. And she is with us to present her paper titled The Dialectics of Historization and Dehistorization, a study of Doris Lessing's novel, The Grass is Singing. So over to you. Good luck.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Respected chairperson, respected dignitaries in this platform, Swati, ma'am, and my dear fellow participants. So the title of my paper is, as ma'am has already read out, The Dialectics of Historicization and Dehistoricization, a study of Doris Lessing's novel, The Grass is Singing. The discourse of history is the most fascinating part of any text. Doris Lessing, as a writer, contributes a great deal in projecting history as one of the most dominating paradigms in the novel. History in the novel appears sometimes as a factual reality and at other times as a cognitive identity. The novel revolves around the figure of Mary Turner, the protagonist. In fact, the first chapter of the novel, as it reads, I quote from the novel, "But even she, since she was dead, was no longer a problem." Unquote. The novel chronicles the saga of our parents and family with an abstract note on transmission and change. This shows that her existence was no less than a problem for society and the community as well. The then society in South Rhodesia gets foregrounded with the belief that, I quote, white civilization which will never admit that a white person, and most particularly a white woman, can have a human relationship, whether for good or for evil, with a black person, unquote. The character of Mary Turner symbolizes a binary between loneliness and alienation, poverty and grievance, and confusion and complexity. My paper takes Doris Lessing's novel, The Grass is Singing, as a point of reference to analyze and examine the different events and episodes of abuse that a young woman encounters throughout her life and living. This study emphasizes the psychological harms that a female passes through because of social prejudice and injustice. It also aims to showcase the horrific personal experiences of a girl and her dilemma and distress. It further insists on to highlight the varied connotations of the usage of the term history, particularly about imbalance, discrimination, and assault. New historicism as a literary theory certifies the commodification of history and the altered one indeed. It manifests its synthetic power to show the dialectic notion of historicization and dehistoricization. Greenblatt coined the term New Historicism for the first time. Further, he and Gallagher write, the notion of authenticity seemed and continues to seem misplaced, for New Historicism is not a coherent, close-knit school in which one might be enrolled or from which one might be expelled. the term has been applied to an extraordinary assortment of critical practices. Moreover, Greenblatt and John Brannigan explain new historicism that is concerned with the past, again that past that serves as a momentum for the present political construction. Further, my paper also refers to the definition of the term taken from Oxford English Dictionary that defines it as a form of cultural analysis which examines how a cultural product interacts with and participates in its historical context, especially concerning the power relations operating within the society of its time. Further, my paper also refers to Walter Scott, who emphasizes a different alternative where he talks about the ways and the habits of the characters that also embody history. Lessing places a special emphasis on time and refers to the absolute necessity of the past to frame the present. Lessing's historicization of the text and dehistoricization of the contextual idea shows her as a psychologically advanced and accorded figure. Lessing rightly says, I quote from the novel, "For Mary, the word home, spoken nostalgically, meant England, although both her parents were South Africans and had never been to England. It is from this store that her father squandered his salary in drink, and finally she becomes a wandering native, who is sent to boarding school, and her life has changed. Later, she becomes a pleasant and a comfortable woman in South Africa. She seems to hate her childhood." Lessing writes, "She had the undistinguished dead-level appearance of South African white democracy." Further, M.H. Abrams writes, "New historicists conceive of a literary text as situated within the institutions, social practices, and discourses that constitute the overall culture of a particular time and place, and with which the literary text interacts as both a product and a producer of cultural energies and quotes." Unquote. Mary Turner in the novel seems to be shy, immune, strong, impersonal, and conscious of her mind and thoughts. As the novel reads, and so it had gone by, day after day, week after week, year after year. South Africa is a wonderful place for the unmarried white women. Unquote. The later part of her life shows her changed self. Here, she appears to be a hollow and emptied character. Even at the slightest provocation of kiss and sex, she was not capable of recreating herself. Her feverish and unsettled proclamation procures her to meet Dick Turner, whom she later marries. The hard brown African soil and the arcing blue sky make him claustrophobic. In At the Periphery of Time, Doris Lessing and the historical novel, Philip Sang writes, "Southern Rhodesia prided itself on maintaining its rigorous Englishness." He further writes, "In her fictional rendition of Rhodesia, Lessing captures his peculiar brand of Englishness. Mary's concept of home and store signify her preoccupation both with English legacy and African ideology. Mary had a strange experience after she marries Dick. It was not out of love, but out of necessity to be secured in society. After some time, she feels caged and went out into the dark outside the house. Her rage against him and her anger was terrible to him. In an instant, she seems to become viciously, revengefully angry against him, against the matron, against everyone. She sees her future as a tired stoicism. She becomes self-exhausted, and that was the beginning of an inner disintegration within her. At a later period of time, Mary shows her discontent with the working people even. As the novel reads, they were sullen and angry listening to her, with inattention, simply waiting for her to finish. Moreover, the sensation of being boss over perhaps 80 black workers gave her new confidence. It was a good feeling, keeping them under her will, making them do as she wanted. Lessing writes, she hated their sullenness, their averted eyes when they spoke to her, their veiled insolence, and she hated more than anything with a violent physical repulsion the heavy smell that came from them, a hot, sour animal smell. In this regard, I would like to quote Reinhard Koselleck, who writes, "Historical time, if the concept has a meaning, is bound up with social and political actions, with concretely acting and suffering human beings and their institutions and organizations." Unquote. The native, who is addressed as the mission boy by Dick, becomes a constant reality in the life of Mary Turner. Lessing writes, "It was impossible for Mary Turner to thrust him out of her mind like something unclean. His presence in her life seems to be powerful and commanding as well. She watches him covertly and feels his presence overtly." Lessing introduces Moses as a native whose unconditional care for her welfare made her think about their unnamed relationship. She inwardly asked herself, would they allow Moses to strengthen that new human relationship between them? The presence of the black man encircles her with curiosity and strangeness. Her every sense seems to be alert. Moses' horny feet, broad muscular back, dark resentful look, and big hand with the lighter palm make her both cautious and withdrawn. Her first ever interrogation with Moses presents her as an annoyed, furious, angry, violent, and hysteric woman. Matt Hickling writes that new historicist scholars think champion women, children, people of color, non-Christians, and other previously marginalized groups as essential components of the larger historical narrative. In this regard, Lessing exclaims, "What has happened? What was that? The formal pattern of black and white, mistress and servant, had been broken by the personal relation. There was hatred, irrationality, and immobility between the two. Later, it develops into a more matured and soft attachment. Her attitude of dignity gets lost in the sense of gentle mortification." Lessing remarks, "He put out his hands reluctantly, loath to touch her, the sacrosanct white woman. His abstract existence becomes a panorama of concrete sustenance. The usual anger of Mary at Moses' tone and her fascination with it marks the duality in her character. She becomes obsessed with the thought of the Africans. As we read in the novel, I quote, "It was a nightmare, the powerful black man always in the house with her." Unquote. Frick remarks, "The Africans told stories, but we were not allowed to mix with them. The only contact I had with blacks was that I had with servants." Unquote. In a similar manner, in her foreword, Lessing says, "And here I still am, trying to get out from the middle of the novel under that monstrous legacy, trying to get free." Mary Turner's dislike of the country refers to the impact of the colonial setup. Her hatred for blacks and natives procured her colonial self. Her disintegrist reformation of herself caters to her reversal of intention and recognition of truth. She tries to recreate a new history by composing to have a balanced psychological mindset. The novel mainly deals with the binary between love and hatred, good and evil, individual and social and economic and political aspects. It attempts to situate the diverse sequence of relationships and their sustainability. The narrative of the novel situates Mary's childhood and adulthood experiences. She aims to explore the varied range of white colonialism, that too in South Africa. Though she tries to distance herself from the standardized customary beliefs of the colonial whites, but magically she gets associated with African natives like Moses. Her hatred towards the black natives represents the total life of humanity as a great historical process. The text opens with Mary, who desires to upgrade herself professionally and never thinks of making a family. She seems to have achieved success in her professional career. She seems to be an unconventional woman who always inclines herself to listen to the echo of her mind. Her conjugal life was not a healthy one. The novel articulates Mary's desire to become a mother and Dick's eventual rejection of it. Her association with Moses discovers a new discourse in the novel. Mary tries to recognize different domains of personal and professional attitudes, and social and racial divisions and disorders. Her depiction of her growing up and motherly love and fatherly insolence creates an overall space for a newer creation. The structural psychology of the novel, sociology of the novels rests on the aspects of historical convention and congruence. The plot deals with issues like individuality, alienation, relationship goals, conjugality, dissatisfaction, and grievance. The character of Turner unveils a particular liaison between home and identity, life and longings, affection and detachment, growth and maturity, marriage and discord, and many more. The novel underscores ideas on social disparity and familial encounter. Further, history remains in its disruptive form throughout the novel. It dwells with truth, existence, acceptance, and inclusiveness. Thank you, ma'am. With this, I conclude.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandrama Sen, for sharing your thoughts. You challenged us with history, but I think that you brought many her stories, many women's stories through your voice and reading of Lessing and the heroines in the text. So thank you very much for your generosity. Dr. Swati, shall we move on to the next presenter, or how about the comments or the question? Should we leave them to the Q&A later?
I think, Hanin, this is what you should do. We should move to the next panelist.
Okay, sure. So our next panelist is Dr. Lancy Thomas Kurakar.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, she's an assistant professor in English in St. Gregorius College, Kerala, India. I hope that I have pronounced that correctly. So Dr. Kurakar is an assistant professor and affiliated to the University of Kerala, India. Her doctoral research was in the area of childhood studies. She has majored in both philosophy and English language and literature. Her research interests lie in childhood, Gothic fiction, and gender studies. She has published papers in the Compass, Research and Criticism, and she has a chapter, yes, she co-authored a chapter titled Pedophobic Audiences, Mapping the Presence of the Child in Horror Cinema, edited by Baker Rutherford and Pama Tato. The paper is titled Maternal Obligation and the Well-Being of the Home, the Fifth Child as an Ethical Political Experiment. So to you, Dr. Lancy, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Barumi. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present a paper. My paper is titled Maternal Obligation and the Well-Being of the Home, the Fifth Child as an Ethico-Political Experiment. This paper is still a work in progress. I have compiled a lot of my observations regarding the book, and I invite suggestions and further ideas, further research from the participants. So the fifth child poses an anthropological riddle at the heart of its narrative. Can a proto-human being be born to a human being? And if so, how will they cope with each other and others? This is a scarcely veiled ethico-political challenge as well. The problem of integrating the other into cultured society. Lessing's tale presents an evolutionistic thought problem. What if an individual belonging to an extinct proto-human race gets born through normal biological process, and how will family and society cope with it? How can one accommodate a biologically born oddity, one who is particularly pre-wired, as the narrative declares, to be violent and untamable? The Fifth Child is a novel which is in many ways strange, one of the strange works in Doris Lessing's oeuvre, because it has many characteristics which we can find in a monster novel, so to speak, a Gothic novel, and more specifically, the monster novel, which is a popular genre. And Harriet, I'll just sum up the storyline. Harriet in Lessing's novel is a mother who must come to terms with her fifth offspring, Ben, who she and the limitedly omniscient narrative voice believes to be an atavistic throwback. The novel is set in 1970s Britain. David and Harriet, the model couple, embark on an old-fashioned reproductive project to birth numerous children, at least 6 at first, and then go on to aim at 8 and house them in a Victorian mansion, far and safe from the turbulent and progressive society around them. A series of unplanned pregnancies follow in steady succession. The Lovats have both admirers and critics until the fifth child is conceived. And until the fifth child is conceived, all goes according to this plan. Ben destroys the very fabric of the ideal family and his parents' idealistic project. There are no more children after Ben. In a naturalistic style reminiscent of Thomas Hardy, the character's ambition is overturned by the vagaries of nature, of evolution, of genetics. Harriet eventually comes to consider birth a challenge to destiny, owing to the frightening uncertainty of what or whom one is giving birth to. Ben does not belong. He is unable to integrate into the family. He has primitive instincts and appearance, and he is unable to follow familial or social codes of behavior and conform. He is institutionalized for a brief period in brutal conditions, but is timely rescued by his mother, who is guilt-stricken by his plight. This marks the point in the narrative in which Harriet makes a definitive choice, choosing Ben over the rest of the family, moral obligation over domestic happiness. Harriet ostracizes in this action herself along with Ben. This is the brief plot summary of the novel. And about the origin of the novel, Lessing remarked in one of her interviews that the fuel for that book was frustration and rage, the total intransigence of our helplessness in the face of terror and horror. And the background was the Soviet-Afghan war. And she again said in another one of her interviews that the energy for that book came from my anger about Afghanistan. It was a blocked fury that translated itself into that book. So, nevertheless, despite all this realistic background, the novel belongs firmly in the genre of the Gothic. The ambiguous nature of the monster, who is unknowable for what it is, the monster as Ben, the dark and spacious Victorian house, the primal sexual drive stimulated by the ancient bedroom, and the novel's fascination with dichotomies and contrasts, all situate the novel within the confines of Gothic realism. It was indeed inspired by a real-life complaint by a mother who had written a letter to Lessing, and she complained in her letter that her fourth child resembled the devil and extraterrestrial and dangerous. So I'm looking at the thematic structure of the novel, and I found that there is a theme of anachronism running throughout the novel, which is in connection to the theme of primitivity. An overarching theme of anachronism runs throughout the novel. For instance, when the couple David and Harriet are introduced, the narrator remarks that the common element that set them apart from the rest and which attracted both to each other was their attitude to sex. They were old-fashioned, believers in the institution of marriage and family, and the idea that children symbolize procreative abundance and happiness. They were against the pill. Having insufficient means to support such a dream, they depended on their parents for financial and physical support. This is again a subversion of the nuclear domestic ideal of the 20th century. The theme of outdated and modern value systems, peoples, and species coexisting in the same environment is further exemplified in the later description of violent, disrespectful youth, terrifying the streets and even the tradition-bound Lovat home with their presence. So we have the theme of primitivity which coexists with modernity. And this is, and the family which had tried to isolate itself from the environment, from the modern environment, is suddenly unable to do that because their son itself, Ben himself, brings in the gangs from outside. So again, to exemplify the theme of primitivity, the old bedroom in the new house the couple acquire over mortgage appears privy to past lusts as well. When the couple have unplanned sex in the bedroom, there is no electricity yet in the house, having been newly bought. The room transforms to a cave that houses primal desires which are uncontrolled, unpredictable, and subject to nature. The narrator says, I quote, "Now the room was quite dark. It looked vast, like a black cave that had no end. A branch scraped across a wall somewhere close. There was a smell of cold, rainy earth and sex." End quote. Even David transforms to someone Harriet cannot recognize. He lets out, again I quote, loud, reckless, unscrupulous laugh uncharacteristic of him. When he smiled, the smile includes her, but on his own terms. His eyes gleamed with thoughts she could not guess at. She felt she did not know him. David, she said quickly to break the spell, but his arm tightened around her and he gripped her upper arm with a hand she had not believed could be so strong, insistent. The grip said, "Be quiet." So this transformation is suggestive of David. David is able to become the primal male in the cave of primal desire, while Harriet remains rooted to culture, the world of civilized values and principles. So to the end of the novel, there is this dichotomy between David and Harriet. And this difference helps or allows Harriet to take the stand between her family and her values. It allows David to repudiate Ben as a hostile stranger and Harriet to embrace Ben as her son. So in the scene of the institutionalization, David is completely nonchalant while Harriet is moved by guilt and she has to go and rescue him from his misery. The mother and child are locked in a struggle for survival during the period of gestation. Her struggle is solitary. David is unable to reach her emotionally because she was as though possessed and had gone right away from him, I quote, gone right away from him in this battle with the fetus, which he could not share. Her pains were sharp and incessant. She started to take multiple tranquilizers to quiet down the fetus, get, I quote, a respite from the ceaseless battering and striving. When Harriet speaks of her 5-month-old fetus as, I quote, the being crouching in her womb or the savage thing inside her, the feral language evokes the discourse of degenerative primitivism that sets the tone of the plot. Then at birth, he is described as a primitive-looking child. He does not look like a human baby at all. He is likened to a troll or a goblin. He's advanced for his age in strength and development. He's aggressive and unable to be cuddled. I quote, "Never, not once did he subside into a loving moment. He resisted, he strove, he fought. He has raw primitive instincts, using his bare hands to strangle animals and birds, to strangle his brother, to even eat a piece of raw meat from the fridge as he crouched on the dining table." So as the novel progresses, the primitivity that Ben displays is increasing, is emphatic. So there is no doubt at the end that this is not a subjective perspective of Harriet. It is clear to everyone that he is an atavistic throwback. And this is despite Lessing claiming that she has never written, she has written unrealistic, she hasn't written unrealistic novels. This is, according to her, a very evolutionarily possible novel because this idea of multiple genes passing down across generations and suddenly a proto-human being becoming born is a possible scientific possibility. And this is the possibility that the text addresses. And I find that there is a political dimension to this fact, because at the same time, while the mother is having this struggle with her child, the 1970s Britain is facing a struggle with progress, with gangs, with youth terrorizing the streets. So this struggle outside, this conflict outside or violence outside is compared to the violence that is going on within the home. And like all the Gothic novels, the doctors, the medical field is unable to explain the phenomenon. And like that, in this novel also, doctors and even nurses, they cannot sympathize with Harriet, share or confirm her suspicions. He is described by them as a real little toughie, a healthy boy, a real little wrestler, a hyperactive child. And on showing her doctor her breasts, which were bruised black around the nipples from Ben's aggressive sucking, the doctor remarks, "Naughty baby." And this Harriet finds very remarkable. And she's torn between the impulses to be free of him as well as to take care of him. So this ambiguous response to the child is seen in Harriet. At multiple points in the narrative, Harriet feels concern for him, rushing to save him from danger while wishing she had been too late. She takes care of him when he is ill, despite the physical toll it takes on her, because as she remarks in frustration to the doctor, "After all, I don't want to kill the nasty brute." She catches him in time when he nearly falls over his cot at 9 months. She saves him from falling from the windowsill and installs bars on all the windows to prevent future mishaps and so on. But after all these things, she later regrets she was just in time to see it and prevent his death. Harriet feels like a criminal, condemned as in primitive societies for having given birth to a freak. She complains to David, I quote, "But we are supposed to be civilized." The family, except Harriet, discussed the possibility of finding an institution for Ben, who had become dangerous. He was locked in, watched incessantly so that he did not hurt the other children, pet animals, or even himself. Harriet emphatically tells David that he is our child, to which he replies no, and then adds, "Well, he certainly isn't mine." Unable to endure the guilt any longer, Harriet set out alone to rescue Ben from the institution in which he had been housed under torturous and horrific conditions. He is unconscious, naked, and in a straitjacket, lying in a room covered with feces and urine when Harriet rescues him, cleans him. Her heart ached, I quote, as it would for one of her own real children. So this conflict that the mother faces by including one of her sons and being ostracized from the family because of that is a very peculiar maternal condition in the novel. The father is able to remove himself from the birth, from the child, from the monstrous offspring, so to speak. But Harriet feels guilty, and she feels rooted in culture. She feels rooted in culture. Just a minute. She feels rooted in culture, so that she is unable to make a decision to, abandon him and take care of the family. So this contrast between maternal obligation and the well-being. So these are two opposing ideas in the fifth child, and we can see the child Ben as a metaphor for all socially disintegrable groups or classes in society. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nancy, for highlighting the maternal and the monstrous, and probably the word is monstrous in the text and in the reaction to this child, special child. So thank you very much for your ideas and what you have shared with the audience.
Thank you.
So our third presenter for this session is Mrs. Vasanti, who is a lecturer in English at SGK Government Degree College, Andhra Pradesh, India. Mrs. Vasanti is working in Pradesh, India. She has acquired her post-graduation in English literature from University of Madras in 2011. She has 14 years of teaching from various degree engineering colleges. She has edited 2 books and has written some research papers organized 3 webinars, 1 international, 2 national. Her area of interest are ecofeminism, eco-criticism, feminism. So she's presenting a paper that is titled Ecofeminist Shades in Doris Lessing novel, The Cleft. So moving from the maternal and the struggle of a mother into other forms of struggling or the struggling in Mother Nature. So over to you, Mrs. Vasanti. Can you hear me, Mrs. Vasanti?
Swati?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Namaste, ma'am. Namaste, and good evening to one and all.
Namaste.
First of all, I would like to extend my sheer gratitude to all the respected organizers for selecting my paper to be presented in this event. Really, I take this opportunity as an honor to share my ideas, taking one of the works of the key figure of this day, Ms. Doris May Lessing. Born in Iran, brought up in Rhodesia, and settling in London, Lessing herself is an mongrelization of all cultures and heritage. All these impressions can be witnessed in all her works, creating great impact on the minds of the readers. She was awarded the Nobel Prize for her outstanding contribution in literature in the year 2007. Today, my paper, Ecofeminist Shades in Doris Lessing, The Cleft, stitches the thin threads of ecofeminism on the fabric of the fecund novel, The Cleft, slightly embroidered with the theme of quest for home. Women are in the world, not of it as well. The world has given birth to many luminaries who, with their literary skills, create miracles with their pens, which could never be imagined. They revert to present some peculiar and spurious ideas through their unique style of thinking. Doris Lessing, a Nobel laureate of 2007, and the same year of the birth of the novel The Cleft, is one among those who stood as evidence for this renown for this. In this work, this female writer extols the origin of human species in a peculiar way, deconstructing the known notion that woman is born out of man. Being a woman, she proceeds through this novel, giving due credit to the female gender, portraying this that they are the primal human stock for the creation of human species on Earth. This point made us to explore this work from the perspective of ecofeminism as a literary theory, foregrounds only on women and nature and its related features. This paper examines how Doris Lessing has projected the traits of ecofeminism without actually being an ecofeminist. Further, this novel beautifully shows the bonding of nature and women, and I quote the words of Susan Griffin, the roaring inside her, when they face a maelstrom, when the first monster entry came into their life. Now, discussing on ecofeminism, we can see that it is one of the nascent literary thoughts gaining attention these days. Besides giving feminine attributes to nature and probing into the close connection and relationship between women and nature, this theory developed as what is to be called as ecofeminism or ecological feminism. Coined by French feminist Francoise d'Aubonne in 1974, this theory views nature and women at the same standpoint and advocates equality of gender and respect for nature and women and their mutual cooperation. Well, the gist of a novel in a nutshell runs like this. The story begins with a narration by a Roman senator during the time of Emperor Nero, and also intertwined by another narration from one of the cliffs, namely Mare. The narrator narrates the story of human genesis, taken from the pieces of documents and oral histories passed down through the ages. He narrates that in the beginning, humanity was composed solely of females called cliffs who reproduced asexually. They lived by the sea and they are partially aquatic. They called themselves as cliffs, named after their habitat, cleft, which they deemed sacred, and they resemble the female genitalia. They get impregnated by the moon, wind, and give birth to female babies. But at one point of time, a cleft gives birth to a male, and the entire tribe of clefts gets terrified while witnessing the difference in physical feature and calls it as a monster. From there on, more male babies are born, which they call as squats due to the resemblance of their genitalia, and decides to throw them onto the killing rock as a prey to the eagles, assuming that they are deformed babies. But paradoxically, the eagles take the baby to the other side of the rock into a valley where they are suckled by a doe. And then every time a baby squat is born and thrown onto the killing rock, the eagles swoop down and take the babies to the suckling doe, thereby making the so-called squat tribe to emerge and thrive as a community. One day, a cleft is caught and mass raped and killed by the squats, and after this incident, whether ill or well, the visits and copulation of squats and clefts evolves, transforming the situation from asexual reproduction to sexual mating of the clefts with squats. With this, the entire community of humans come into evolution, and all the natural, social, biological processes emerge thereof, such as taking care of children, forming communities, playing the roles of father, mother, etc. The story ends up with the characters, namely Morana and Horsa, representing the female and male community respectively, bringing us back to the real world from a world of chimera. Based on the above discussions and theories of ecofeminism, the Cleft novel is passed. This scrutiny tries to analyze the incidents occurring in the novel, juxtaposing it with the ecofeminist grist. Lessing, being influenced by Virginia Woolf's seminal work, A Room of One's Own, where Woolf says that, I quote, "A woman must have a money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." Hopefully, Lessing is an evidence of this idea through her fiction, The Cleft. Unimaginably, just inspired by a scientific article, Lessing was able to project a unique and indomitable theory of human genesis, elevating herself to be seen as a grande dame in the English literary world. By the very introduction of the clefts and assigning their physical, biological, and habitual features as feminine, Lessing inherently gives freedom and liberty to women, depending on nature, for all their biological rituals like reproduction, menstrual cycle, etc. In the novel, the lines of Lessing, I quote, "It was remarked that the basic and primal human stock was probably female, and that males came along later as a kind of cosmic afterthought. They lacked the solidity of women, who seem to have endowed with the ways of the world. Men, in comparison, are unstable and erratic." I unquote. Inquisitively, Lessing poses the question to the readers, I quote, "Is nature trying something out?" Unquote. Lessing imagines and invites us to a purely feminine world where women live in communion with nature, free from worries and oppression. They depend on nature for their biological activities. In fact, nature takes care of them. They are lazy, free, and independent, residing on the rock near the sea. As in her article, The Multiple Meanings of Cleft, in Doris Lessing, Annie Laurie Brevet remarks, I quote, "Although the cleft can be viewed as an amphilos of female tribes' world, it is solipsistic, self-confined utopia is bound to fall to pieces as the fragmented, self-reflexive storytelling reveals." Unquote. One day, the cleft gave birth to a male baby, which they called as Monster. Appalled by its features, Lessing, in the words of Lessing, I quote, "The tubes and lumps, they throw the baby on the killing rock, where they thought would be devoured by the eagles. But the eagles took the male babies to the nearby valley, where the babies are suckled by a doe, thereby acting as a guardian and saviors of the males." Ecofeministically speaking, the savior of the squats and the hatred of the clefts, the eagle stands as a symbol showing the preliminary oppression of males, of oppression of the females by the males. I quote, "Something like a war developed between the eagles and the first females, who could not possibly win. Not only were they unused to fighting or even unused to physical activity." Unquote. The oppression is defined is in a very strong sense as war, as the eagles are generally symbolized as the symbol of masculinity. The beginning of the early stages of oppression here can be cited from these incidents from the lines in the novel. I quote, "On the other hand, those eagles, the persecutors of the first females, became their savior of the first males." Unquote. Dr. Zerin Erin has mentioned in her article, The Patriarchal Implications in Cleft by Doris Lessing, has cited what Bederman has said, "Eagle is known as the king of birds." She further adds that, according to George E. Milonos, Among scholars, it has become a common practice to associate the eagle intimately with Zeus and to consider the king of birds as an inseparable companion and attribute to the father of gods and men. Well, as the cleft stood as the symbol of motherhood for the females, the eagle was the father of the males. I quote the lines from the novel: "We are the eagle, the children of the eagle. He is our father. He hates our enemies. He fights for us against the clefts." Unquote. After the mass raid by the squads on a cleft, this unusual tendency of giving birth asexually, however, comes to an end. And after, when some of the clefts were grabbed and raped in the lines of Lessing, put their tubes into them, unquote, the clefts lost their power to give birth without them. Thus, the strenuous journey of the clefts begins as cited from the book of Genesis by Madeline Stone in her book, When God Was a Woman. I quote, "I will greatly multiply your in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desire shall be of a husband, and he shall rule over you." I unquote. Lessing attributed biological freedom for women and their productivity without the intervention and cooperation of the males, expresses a psychological insight in her interest in communism, projecting social justice to all, especially to the people of Africa, stand as a metaphorical representation of women being the first generation of mankind. But whatever be the case, the squads can do anything, but they don't possess the power of giving birth like the clefts. In the beginning, the clefts gets pregnant by the winds, but after the copulation process has begun between the squads and the clefts, the tendency of the wind too is changed into noise, frightening the boys and destroying their shelter. In the lines of the novel, I quote, "The noise was in fact a wind coming from what must have been the east, one so strong, so irresistible that they all believed at first in all kinds of supernatural intervention. The wind is moaned and shrieked, it sobbed and it screamed. It was the noise, something none of the people had ever imagined." I unquote. The truth that oppression on women is never brought to light and goes without notice can be understood through the murder and the pandemonium of rape on a cleft, which was not recorded in history and in fact goes unnoticed. But on the other hand, the killing of monster first born to them by the cleft, which they haven't committed voluntarily, have adequate records. This incident shows the deliberate suppression of the females by the males. The lines from the novel, told by the Roman narrator, I quote, "Here is the war chant of the very first men. Kill the clefts, kill them, kill them. They are our enemies, kill them all." I unquote. The above quotation shows the aggressiveness of the male on females. Further, the clefts were used only to appease their sexual hunger, the demands of their maleness by the squads. Though this novel has two narrators, the Roman as well as Mare, we get a common coincidence theme, namely the theme of ecofeminism, the domination and oppression of the females by the males from both of their narration. As Zerrin Irene to indicate the power of males has quoted the lines from John Ruskin's book titled Sesame and Lilies, the man's power is active, progressive, defensive. He is eminently the doer, creator, discoverer, the defender. But the woman's power is not for rule, not for battle, and her intellect is not for intervention or creation, but for sweet ordering, arrangement, and decision. I unquote. As indicated by the above quotation, the man in the novel gets more interest and enthusiasm to explore more islands and diners without bothering about the clefts, the children, their homes, or taking care of their problems. They used the clefts to sate their hunger, both physically and sexually. As a postbellum novel, it even projects the ideas of racial conflicts when looked through the lens of racism and racial discrimination. In this context, the clefts can be viewed as blacks and squads as white as well. The geographical cleft is metaphorically be taken as Mother Africa, where the native blacks live in harmony and are nurtured in the lap of African nature, just as the clefts are nurtured by moon, wind, sea, and even the red flowers of the blossoming in the cleft. The emergence of the squads, born out of them and developing into a community, and in turn grabbing the freedom and exploitation of the clefts, just be a witness of the colonization and exploitation of the native Africans by the white race, showcasing the theme of quest for home. Throughout the novel, we can sense a string of racial discrimination behind each and every incident. The shift of the clefts from their habitat to the valley and smelly caves where males live also shows how the native innocent black women are exploited and oppressed and are made to live under the domination of male patriarchy of not only the whites but also the blacks. In her thesis, Reflections of Ecofeminism, in Doris Lessing Cleft, Cobra Beisel mentions that, I quote, Lessing has always had a serious engagement with political protest, both through her works and literary participation since her youth supported the oppressed and harassed groups like women, the Black, third world countries, once colonized communities, and nature. Thus, by the end of the novel, Marona and Horsa emerge representing the tribes of clefts and squads respectively. Although the beginning of the novel content with the fact that females were the first on earth and males were born out of them, at the end, everything is tossed and gets reversed, placing the females again as a subordinate of man, undergoing their oppression and patriarchy. The novel explains the known truth, though women voice independently and boast themselves on freedom, liberty, but at one point of time, somehow or the other, they fall as prey in the hands of men and retreated again to experience the same cycle of reproduction, oppression, exploitation in this patriarchal and male-centered society. As said by Simone de Beauvoir, I quote, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, I unquote. The epigraph of the novel has Robert Graves' quotes, I quote, man does, women is. These lines undoubtedly shows that though men are born out of women or made secondary, always does the same thing of oppressing, dominating, and exploiting women, and it is always the status of women to undergo such oppression, even if all forms of freedom is given to them, for which the theory of ecofeminism fights for. Though nature tries to find something out for the liberation of women, their status always gets ended up exploited and dependent in the hands of men and make it obvious and inevitable. As Yusho Kui, in her article, Analysis of Ecofeminism and its Influence on Lessing's The Cleft, rightly points out, I quote, when she produces this novel, Lessing, consciousness of ecofeminism has been matured, so we can see her hope for human beings to establish a harmonious relationship between nature and human beings, men and women, unquote. Ecofeminism expects neither the beautiful names given to women nor the appreciation or adoration of their delicate characteristic features from men, but expect equal harmony and unoppressed attitude towards them. Lessing finally portrays this harmony in the final lines of the novel through the thoughts of Horsa lying on the lap of Marona. I quote, tell her about the wonderful place I found. Yes, I will. She will want to see it too. I'm sure of it. She will understand. Yes, she will come with me. We will go together. I unquote. Let's hope that the thoughts of Horsa shall come true and places Marona in a more happier world. Generally, at the end of one, there is a beginning of the other. Thus, with the explosion of the cleft at the end of the novel, all the oppression and male domination be exploded and destroyed, creating a new world where both the genders shall live in happy harmony along with nature. Thank you once again for giving me this fabulous opportunity to connect with you and present my ideas through this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for you, Mrs. Fesanti, and thank you for this interesting panel with plenty of themes, inspirational talks. I'm sure that you have covered a number of important and interesting points. Indeed, they were raised by Dr. Chandrama, Dr. Lancy, and Mrs. Fesanti. I'm sure that you would be pleased to answer them, to answer the questions. And before this, could you join me in showing our appreciation to the speakers in the usual way?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my ideas and present a beautiful novel before you in this memorable event. Thank you so much.
Could I ask Lancy a question? I had one in mind.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
It's just a confirmation that I was seeking. You did mention that about the sources of fifth child, that is inspiration, particularly referred to the Russian war and the Afghan war. Could you just let me know the interviews which were involved, in which she stated, if it is ready in hand, else you can just let me know. I'm just curious.
Yes, it is from Doris Lessing's Conversations. It is edited by Ingersoll, Earl G.
Yeah.
Ingersoll.
Yeah, I know that one. Okay, so maybe I just maybe I missed that part somewhere. Yeah, I'm acquainted with that one. So yes.
Sorry. I think
Yeah,
Ahmad said that he had a question for the first speaker, which is why I was not rushing in to ask my questions also. So maybe we should let him ask the question wherever Ahmad is. I can't see him on the...
Professor Asanuzzahman, he's there.
Yeah, so he said that he had a question on the person who did the first paper, presented the first paper. So,
Asan sir.
He's muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
No, I didn't have any question. I think it was Anis.
oh, sorry, it's Mohammed. Sorry. Yeah, so please go first.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So the reason why I've been looking back and forth between the abstracts, listening to you very carefully. Can you hear me well, all of you? Just so to make sure, because I have a question. Great. Okay. So the whole session is entitled "Listening Through the Many Lenses of Theory." So, generally speaking, what is ill-expected is that to read a novel from a theoretical perspective in an attempt, speaking, is that we are trying to always make the novel look very limited, because in a very influential paper by Eve Sedgwick-Klosowski, she wrote a paper entitled The Paranoid Reading, and she talked about how critics and scholars for a specific period of time were completely blinded by those theories, and what they happened enslaved the novels into these theories. Okay, so luckily, that some of the papers in this panel did not fall into that trap. So the thing is, I have a few questions for the first paper, in fact, by Dr. Shadrima Sen, about history, the notion of history. I found it very, very intriguing, and great job. Okay. The only thing I couldn't understand, if you could help me, maybe I couldn't understand it. So I think the notion of history is still problematic. And for many of us, especially who teach theory, is that history touches upon, the dialectics of Hegel, Marx, and for me, generally speaking, when we speak of Doris Lessing, most of the time we speak of her in post-colonial, settings. So when you mentioned, for instance, new historicism, I find it a bit, maybe it's on me. Would you explain more what you mean by looking at Doris Lessing's understanding of history within a post-colonial setting from a new historical perspective by Stephen Greenblatt? Because let me tell you something. Stephen Greenblatt, by the way, towards the end, actually, of the 90s, early 2000s, he has questioned himself. He has questioned his own theory of new historicism, because new historicism does not question hierarchies. They rather question this blind faith in history and how we can read any work of art in light of history. So what he did with Shakespeare, for instance, in the Invisible Bullets, he tries to show how the play by William Shakespeare informs history and how history informs the text. Okay, so I don't see quite so how you spoke about a new historicism that has been absolutely grown obsolete, by the way, now by himself, in relation to Doris Lessing understanding of history from a post-colonial perspective. Would you please tell me more about that? Thank you.
Ratna, your mic, please.
Myself off. Sorry. I was just saying, if there are more questions to the speaker, we could take all of them and then she could answer, and then we could move to speaker number 2 and 3. I'm sorry, Barumi, I mean, this is not, I'm not trying to, what is the word I'm looking for, conduct this session at all. I just thought, I can't hear you, by the way. You're muted too.
Ratna, you had a question. You can take whichever way you would like to approach.
Yeah, my question wasn't to Chandrima, it was to the other two speakers. I'll wait for Chandrima to answer before we move to the other speakers. Is that okay? Baromi, you want to say something?
Yes, sorry, my mic was muted. So I was wondering if Dr. Chandrima is with us, since Dr. Anis Fashishi asked her question, and probably we can listen to the questions and then we can give them some minutes to interact with the audiences and to answer them. So you have a question, Dr. Ratna?
Not to Chandrima. I have questions for the other speakers. So whenever they're ready.
Go ahead. You can ask them or use the chat box.
Okay, so my question to Lancy, I must first thank all the three speakers for their presentations, and it was very nice to quickly go through Doris Lessing's oeuvre, as it were, because with the clef we moved to 2007. The Grass is Singing is 1950. So we went through Lessing without engaging with the Golden Notebook. So this must really be a first for any seminar anywhere in the world. Jyotsna, you have better records of what's happening. So please tell me if I'm right or wrong. But my question to Lancy was that, you begin by saying that The Fifth Child is a Gothic text. And yes. I found that a little troubling because, I grew up reading this horror story by Ira Levin, 1967, I think, or 68. Then there was a terrible film as well called Rosemary's Baby. And it's the kind of story that freezes your insides, okay? It blows your mind away. And then, when I became an adolescent, my parents took me to see The Omen. So first I read Rosemary's Baby, then I saw Omen, and this put me off the whole idea of growing up, recognizing I had a womb, because I thought this was really the most dangerous thing ever in the world, okay? So I find it very interesting that I found The Fifth Child a troubling book. I also thought it was a fantastic book because it explores the whole notion of how taking for granted, within inverted commas, the perfect human baby that will be born out of, fantastic couples or brilliant couples or intelligent couples within inverted commas again, is something that is extremely arrogant. I mean, for me, that was the most signal statement that The Fifth Child provided, particularly because, it has a sequel called Ben in the World, where we are looking at what happens to this child who grows up. And this is very different from that other new modern horror story called We Need to Talk About Kevin. First a novel, then a film, again terrifying. These are the kind of stories that we should have. Do not read without parental advisory. Do not read without, all kinds of support systems at hand. So I am just curious that you call this story Gothic, because if you are registering the pain and the agony that Ben's mother feels, Lessing is also trying to say that motherhood is not how Dr. Spock makes it sound. Motherhood is not this glorious space where, you give birth to this baby and then everything is roses and soft down. I mean, there is pain. Breastfeeding is terrible. Carrying a child inside your stomach is not fun at all. It doesn't have to be a strange looking child. And then, there's also the space of autism, for instance. And a lot of Ben's characteristics, a lot of his mannerisms, that unplanned violence, that inability to, respond to affection, for instance, and anger can so easily be qualified. I mean, this is a work of fiction that we are looking at. And Lessing doesn't say at any point that he's a proto-human. She says, could be a throwback, and that's how he is. The narrative. So my question to you was, do you really think that The Fifth Child is Gothic fiction? or is working towards Gothic fiction? Or is it really a text that's asking human beings to remember that perfection is an idea that came to us? And it's an idea now for the, I forget the word, but it's an idea that we need to, this whole notion of superhumans or super beings is something that we need to engage with far more seriously. So is she asking us to look differently with a different colored lens at the world? I mean, this is my question to Lancy.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you very
of
much.
course, ma'am. Yes. I think we can look at it as a cautionary tale. I think this is what she has intended in her interviews as well. She mentions that Ben is not to be taken as an evil monster or anything. He does not fit into the world, and that's what that is her side to the representation of Ben. But when I say it is a Gothic novel, what I mean is there are Gothic elements in the novel. If we take the novels that you mentioned, Rosemary's Baby or The Omen or any of these works, these are they come within the genre of horror. And the difference is that there is a bit of darkness in the way what maternity is portrayed and within the novel. And the Gothic elements primarily would be how the child is a monster, right? He's portrayed as a monster. And the fact is that he is actually a proto-human. He's mentioned within the text that he is a atavistic throwback. He's a proto-human. He belongs to a species that lived many years ago before the human species existed. And in one of her interviews, again, I'm quoting from, I'm speaking from Conversations. Doris Lessing mentions that this idea of Neanderthal genes getting passed on in our chromosomes, and this happening is a biological possibility, it's a scientific possibility. So there is this scientific premise behind the story. And the fact is that the spacious home, Victorian home, and the way in which the story unfolds, the one thing that is similar to horror stories is that everyone fails to recognize the monster, even to the end. So that aspect is there in Ben. Only the mother is able to see the monster. Nobody else comes up with the statement that, yes, this is a throwback. Ben is not really a child. Nobody comes up with that kind of statement. So towards the end, she's struggling to make everyone acknowledge this fact. And that is one. So that is why I called it a Gothic novel. There are elements which fit in with the Gothic genre. But we can also see it as a cautionary tale. And Lessing portrays this kind of situation as a warning or what, as you said, ideal motherhood, ideal child, ideal family, and to these concepts. That is one way to look at the book.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lancy. You are right. I agree with you. I think that this image of the troubled mother reveals or unveils the monstrosity of the world that is not ready to accept differences. So probably this is Lessing idea, this her philosophy in invoking these symbols of troubled children or monstrous children, because the world is not ready to welcome differences. And maybe by this encounter between quotation marks, this monstrous child, we get the chance to see the monstrosity of the world. So thank you very much, Dr. Lancy. Dr. Chandrima, if you can respond to Dr. Fashishi's questions, we would be grateful. Dr. Chandrima? I don't know if Dr. Chandrima San with us. No?
No idea.
Maybe she's failing to connect. So could we
okay.
just go on?
I don't know if we can have one or two questions, Dr. Swati, or shall we move on to the next presenter?
Was there any? I'm sorry, I kind of got lost my connection for a while, but I think we have to move on to the next session. And there's a panel discussion in the end, so we have to close this business session for a while, for the time being, and go on to the next one, which is important. It is a keynote speech, which from Professor Dalel Sano from Algeria. However, Professor Sano has fallen sick. She's down with laryngitis, hoarse voice cannot be heard at all, which is why she has sent the paper this evening. She was hoping to get better. And Professor Chandrabhat Chakrabarti, who is Professor Barashat, West Bengal State University, who is also the director of CSCM, Center for Studies in Gender, Culture and Media, West Bengal State University, that supports and houses the LSSA. She had very kindly, she was chairing the session and has very kindly agreed to read the paper for us, so that although we will not have Professor Sanu with us, we are going to hear, because she was so very keen to join us and share her views. So, and it's a perspective from yet another Maghrebian comparative look between Lessing and an Algerian author, playwright. So I think it is going to be over to Professor Chandrabhat Chakrabarti from now.
Thank you, Swati, and I'm really very happy to be able to join this seminar today. Let me introduce Dr. Dalil Sano. Dr. Dalil Sano, the keynote speaker of today, is a full professor at the Department of English, Mostaganem University, Algeria, and a poetess. She is involved in many areas, including Arab women writings and world literatures. She has already published a number of academic papers, a series of poems on electronic websites, and 2 books with Lambert Publishing. She is currently involved in newly explored areas like liminality, electronic discourse, digital humanities, and educational technology. I will read her paper, which is titled The Intersection of Doris Lessing's The Good Terrorist and Fadia Fakir's Willow Trees Don't Weep, with a subtitle, The Universality of Womanhood and Terrorism, on her behalf. The present paper seeks to find convergences between Lessing's The Good Terrorist of 1985 and Fakir's Willow Trees Don't Weep of 2040. Although the 2 stories are set in different eras and geographies, the 2 writers succeeded in fictionalizing modern terrorism in their novels in a way that seems outspoken and courageous. While Alice in The Good Terrorist begins a journey of fighting against fascist imperialism to find self-belongingness in doing that, Najwa in Willow Trees decides to trace her father's footsteps to understand why he became a terrorist and gave up on her. And she ends up finding herself too when finds her father. The 2 novels, as this paper attempts to argue, subvert the common understanding of modern terrorism and womanhood by deconstructing the very weakness of the former and the very strength of the latter. The next subheading reads, Lessing's The Good Terrorist and Fakir's Willow Trees Don't Weep, the story of the politics of oppression. Doris Lessing is considered in contemporary world literature as one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. In 2007, at the age of 87, she was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, as she was described as the epicist of the female experience, who with skepticism, fire, and visionary power has subjected a divided civilization to scrutiny. Lessing had been writing provocative, groundbreaking fiction and autobiography since the 1950s, and her 1985 novel, The Good Terrorist, may be one of the most confrontational of all her works. Doris Lessing's The Good Terrorist is a thought-provoking and deeply insightful novel that explores the complexities and motivations behind radical activism and terrorism. Set in 1980s London, the novel follows Alice Mellings, a disillusioned and discontented young woman who becomes involved with a group of radical activists and terrorists. One of the most compelling aspects of this novel is its examination of the radicalization process and the factors that drive individuals to engage in extreme and violent actions. As for the British Jordanian Fadia Fakih, she is an acclaimed writer from Jordan who is best known as a novelist, although she has written several short stories, plays, and critical essays. Her early novels are more concerned with marginalization and genderization and are deeply rooted in the Arab Muslim women's diasporic experience. In the discussions of her novels, Moore and Al-Ghamdi consider the two narratives to be mainly directed towards diasporic voices in an everlasting search for proper places, spaces, wherein main characters are portrayed ostensibly from the standpoint of subaltern and marginalized subjects. In a novel, Willow Trees Don't Whip, the author articulates memory and identity and explores the way introspection and retrospection feature the fragmented subjects in order to discuss thorny issues like fundamentalism, secularism, and existentialism. Fakih's Willow Trees, which was initially titled as The Terrorist's Daughter, relates the story of Omar Rahman, who embarks in an epic journey to save the Islamic world, but winds up as a terrorist, and Najwa, who sets out to save herself, but ends up as a dislocated immigrant in Darham. To reconstruct the story of Najwa and her father, Fakih returns to her sites of memory, which are mostly derived from the aftermath of the Cold War and the corollary of the Soviet Union's invasion on Jordan and the Arab world. In an interview, Fakih features her novel as a rite of passage and a narrative initiation, and states that physical journeys from one country and continent to another are intertwined with internal ones. The Odyssey humanizes and leads towards compassion for self and others, and ultimately forgiveness. After the death of her mother, Najwa decides to trace the father who abandoned her at the age of 3 and join the jihad fighters in Afghanistan in a journey which metamorphoses her into someone who is possibly aware of very complex issues in the world. She wants to get to know why her father prioritizes religion over his loved ones. Najwa starts a journey from Pakistan to the center of Taliban training, to Afghanistan, and eventually to Britain to get answers to her queries. In a sense, Tahiri and Ban characterize Willow Trees Don't Whip as a Bildungsroman that narrates the sore and arduous shaping of a young woman who accidentally gets involved with Islamist organizations and gets through nasty experiences in the various places she has visited as she uncovers her father's past. On her part, Lessing does an exceptional job of delving into the psychology of her characters, portraying their sense of alienation and disenfranchisement, as well as their fervent belief in the righteousness of their cause. Through Alice's perspective, the novel explores the seductive allure of revolutionary ideology and the allure of being part of a movement that promises to bring about significant social change. In addition to its exploration of radicalization, The Good Terrorist also provides a complex and nuanced portrayal of the group dynamics and the interpersonal relationships within the radical activist cell. As Alice becomes increasingly involved with the group, she is drawn into a web of complex interpersonal dynamics, past struggles, and conflicting ideologies. Lessing skillfully depicts the group's internal dynamics, illustrating the tensions that arise as the members grapple with their shifting motivations and diverging visions for the future. Furthermore, The Good Terrorist presents a searing critique of radical activism and terrorism, highlighting the ways in which these movements can be self-destructive and ultimately counterproductive in achieving their goals. Through Alice's experiences, Lessing demonstrates how the group's idealistic vision is undermined by their internal conflicts, personal failings, and ultimately their misguided and ineffective actions. As a whole, The Good Terrorist is a compelling and thought-provoking novel that prompts readers to critically examine the motivations behind radical activism and terrorism. Lessing's insightful exploration of radicalization, group dynamics, and the complexities of revolutionary ideology provides a profound and multi-layered examination of this crucial and timely subject. The novel's timeless themes and incisive characterizations make it a powerful and enduring work that continues to resonate with readers today. Moving on to the next subsection, titled The Intersection of Doris Lessing's The Good Terrorist and Fadia Fakir's Willow Trees Don't Weep. The intersection of Doris Lessing's The Good Terrorist and Fadia Fakir's Willow Trees is a powerful commentary on the universality of womanhood and terrorism. Both novels provide a glimpse into the lives of women living in oppressive circumstances and the difficulties of rebelling against oppressive forces. The women in both novels find themselves in situations of overwhelming violence and must use whatever means necessary to combat their oppressors. Through these novels, we can discern a common trait of female strength in the face of adversity. On the one hand, The Good Terrorist follows Alice, the young woman who abandons her privileged life to join a terrorist cell, just like Najwa's father Omar in Willow Trees. It is true that Alice is filled with idealistic fervor for her cause, yet she soon discovers the harsh reality of terrorism and its devastating effects. Throughout the novel, Alice is constantly torn between her convictions and the demands of the terrorist crew. As she navigates her role in the group and its activities, she must come to terms with her own sense of morality. Alice's story is an explanation of the complexities of womanhood and terrorism and how they intersect in a world of violence and oppression. On the other hand, Willow Trees follows the story of Najwa, who starts a journey to find her patriarch so as to confront him. Eventually, and at the end of her journey, Najwa realizes that her father's love for Hani, his friend, was the only motive for which he deserted his family. And I quote, "You loved him, Dad. He took off his glasses and wiped them. Too much, perhaps." Najwa feels released after having seen and talked to her father, who was sentenced to death. She was like her name indicates in Arabic, Najwa, a whisper or a secret conversation, which, as his father explains to her, "At dawn and after morning prayers, I imagined you. I whispered my answers and blew them, hoping that the breeze would carry them to you. Also, life is secret conversation." Najwa's final home is liberation, daring and knowing, liberated by the spaciousness. And this is a quote, "I stretched my arms out and said to the chariot-shaped cloud, 'Peace be upon you wherever you are.'" After months of studying British trees and much quizzing by Elizabeth over many dinners, I had begun to recognize them. I must go back to sweep my mother's grave. In the last sentence of the novel, one can suggest that Najwa decides to come back to Jordan to change some cruel things the society has long been practicing. I also argue that Najwa would finally find a way in between her father's fundamentalism and her mother's secularism, a way that perceives the truth from a neutral and ideology-free position. The novel represents different forms of extremism. It also represents how those who are ethnically, religiously, and ideologically different should be tolerated. Moving on to the concluding portion, both The Good Terrorist and Willow Trees Don't Weep explore the complexities of womanhood and terrorism in different ways. The two novels offer a unique perspective on the impact of violence on women and how they must use their own inner strength and courage to survive in a hostile environment. Both Alice and Najwa represent a new generation of women who are unafraid to stand up and fight for their beliefs despite the overwhelming odds. In this way, the two novels emphasize the universality of womanhood and terrorism, and how women are often forced to confront different ethical choices in the face of oppression. In a nutshell, The Good Terrorist and Willow Trees Don't Weep provide a complex and nuanced look at the real drives behind terrorism. Also, through the stories of Alice and Najwa, we can gain insight into the struggles faced by women in oppressive societies and the strength and courage that allows them to endure in the face of adversity. The two novels emphasize the universality of womanhood and terrorism and serve as a poignant reminder that women are capable of rising above oppressive forces in order to pursue their own paths. So this brings me to the end of the paper.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Chandra Chakrabarti, for
Thank you.
going through it and reading it out for us. And it was such a rewarding paper. And putting it in context to the rest of the webinar that we were having since yesterday, it is interesting how The Good Terrorist returns to us, and how women and terrorism is again we have a retaking look closer at it, and a work by Lessing. This is what I was having a word with Professor Ratna Raman yesterday, that how Good Terrorists, which is perhaps Josna is also here, not really one of the works that we consider as a favorite among research scholars or paper writers, very interestingly has taken up a lot of attention in this seminar, and that I think is very rewarding, because it shows that the webinar and the paper it's opening up a lot of new roads for Lessing scholarship, which is of course the very business of these chapters, looking at Lessing interactively, comparatively, making intersections, and in the process, one or two are regaining focus. Ratna, you are muted. Okay, right. Go.
Tell me.
No, I thought you were saying something. So
No, wasn't.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Chakrabarti, and we have to rush to the next session, which is the final session. It has a panel discussion involving 5 youngsters, and Professor Ujjaljeet is the moderator of this student panel discussion. Is Ujjal here?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Ujjal.
Hi.
So it's going to be over to you. We have Noha Hamza from the Higher Institute of Language of Tunis, Tunisia. Ilham, Higher Institute of Languages of Tunis, Tunisia. Anisa Ishrat Mona of Independent University, Bangladesh, Dhaka. We have that is an error there in the program. Shanin Dudam, who is an assistant professor, Assistant Nivedita University, Kolkata, India, as nascent as the Doris Lessing, North Africa. He is still a student as far as we are concerned, but welcome into your new role, Professor Dam, and Sudipta Datta, who is also a visiting lecturer. They are all Gen Zs, and that is our topic for the day: how Gen Zs read Lessing. Over to the moderator, Dr. Ujjaljeet, Assistant Professor in English, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, India.
And Swati, we should be able to see all of them as we speak.
Yes. If it is possible to.
Good afternoon.
If it is possible to have your cameras on, then we are kind of going off. So it would be nice, interesting panel.
Yes.
See you.
Okay, thank you so much, Swati. Can you please tell me how much time we have for this session?
They are supposed to make 5 minutes presentation, so not more than that. If they do it a little less, then we can have a little bit of an open house before we call it a wrap for the 2 days.
So, good evening, everyone. It's evening at my place, so good evening, but my greetings to all of you. First of all, I congratulate Buthaina Bajol and her complete team at Tunisia for successful launch of ALS North Africa chapter. So, after listening to the papers which were read yesterday, we can express in the student session, we can express nothing but I guess amazement, and at the same time a lot of hope and satisfaction that yes, Lessing is going into good responsible hands. So Gen Z, which is the focus today, this is that generation which is born after 1997 and till 2012. That is Gen Z. And before them we have Generation Y, Generation X. Probably I don't think anybody would be older than that here. So how this generation sees Lessing, how it reads, and as Swati has already told us, there are 5 very young, vibrant and dynamic scholars who are going to discuss with us the course of Lessing's reading, Lessing's scholarship and actualization of Lessing's vision across the continents, across the places. So we have Nuha, Ilham, Anisa, Swarni, Sudipta. As Swati has already told, I'm going by this order only. So I would first of all invite Nuha Hamza from Higher Institute of Languages, Tunis, Tunisia, to take the podium and express his insights over this subject.
So, good afternoon or evening, everyone, depending on the time zones, of course. I would like to start by saying I'm very honored to be among you, and I would like to thank everybody who presented already for their insightful ideas. I want, of course, to grant a special thanks to my professor and supervisor, Dr. Buthaina, for first of all making me fall in love with Doris Lessing, and second of all giving me this opportunity, and here's to more to come. Okay, so I would attempt to represent the Gen Z's view and take on Doris Lessing through her space fiction narratives, basically Shikasta, because this is the scope of my research work. So to start, I would like to say that in the cosmic tapestry of Doris Lessing's Shikasta, characters embark on an odyssey that intricately weaves together the profound concepts of home and belonging. As Lessing crafts her narrative of cosmic proportions, the exploration of these themes takes on a nuanced and captivating quality. Shikasta challenges the conventional notions by presenting home not as a static place, but rather as a dynamic and cosmic construction. This is exemplified by the novel's profound exploration of characters who are grappling with a sense of displacement from the beginning of the novel up to the end. And this is a harsh aspect of existence that has lately been crystallized like never before in front of the eyes of the Gen Z following the attack on Gaza, which echoes to a great extent what happens in Shikasta, in the events of Shikasta. So we witnessed that as this generation with our own eyes, and showing will always be telling. The characters' cosmic struggles resonate with our contemporary quest for identity by intertwining the celestial landscapes of Shikasta with the multifaceted journey of the Gen Z in defining or trying to make sense of our belonging. We uncover parallels that bridge the cosmic reality with nowadays earthly. So first of all, I'm going to tackle home as a cosmic contrast in Shikasta. Home here is introduced as complex and cosmic, and it transcends the traditional notions in which characters grapple with a profound sense of displacement. They echo the broader human experience of seeking belonging in a vast and ever-changing universe. These celestial forces shaping destinies within the narrative mirror the novel's portrayal of home as a dynamic and evolving concept. As characters navigate cosmic landscapes, their quest for home becomes symbolic of the universal human struggle to find a place and to belong amid the complexities of modernity. Also, Shikasta portrays the shattered realities and navigates the sense of psychological displacement that is constantly faced by this generation. So the characters of Shikasta face disruptions, displacements that mirror the fragility of human connections. This cosmic turmoil resonates with the real-world challenges faced by this generation, a generation navigating a globalized and rapidly changing environment. The characters struggle to find a stable sense of home amidst cosmic upheavals, draws a poignant parallel to the contemporary quest for belonging. Now, this part underscores the universality of human experience of displacement and the intrinsic need for a stable sense of belonging, which we are yet to find as Generation Z. Whether in the cosmic expanse of Shikasta or modern complexity of the Gen Z world. Now, there is yet another aspect that we are dealing with, or we are struggling with, rather, as being part of this generation, is that it is that of the loss of identity. Transition into the contemporary Generation Z grapples with identity and belonging in a globalized society. We have, it seems at times like we no longer have roots, same as the Shikasta people post-war and post-attacks. They no longer know where they belong to, and they are being constantly displaced, whether culturally, psychologically, or even physically. It echoes in the interconnected world of digital age. Generation Z, connected by technology yet seeking individuality, exemplifies a ceaseless quest for a sense of belonging amid diverse cultural influences. This section draws parallels between the characters' cosmic exploration in Shikasta and the contemporary challenges faced by us, the Z generation, highlighting the timeless nature of the human's search for identity and search for roots. And it is with equal importance that Shikasta makes us rediscover home and try resiliently to make sense of a home, even in the absence of traditional tenets that make up a home. So Shikasta unveils the transformative potential embedded in the characters' journeys. Characters within the novel rediscover their sense of home through adaptability and resilience. This mirrors the transformative potential with Generation Z, a generation navigating societal changes with resilience, with adaptability, like no other previous generation. We have a strong sense of adaptability, which cannot be denied. The character's evolution sheds light equally on the adaptability inherent in the contemporary quest for a meaningful sense of belonging. This part emphasizes the capacity for growth and transformation as individuals navigate this complexity of trying to always rapidly find a home in an ever-changing world. So this exploration regards the cosmic odyssey within Shikasta, which emerges as a resonant metaphor for Generation Z's ongoing quest for a meaningful sense of home, which they know beforehand it could change in a click. The novel serves not only as a cosmic saga, but as a reflective lens through which we gain profound insights into the enduring and universal journey of finding one's place in the vast expanse of the universe. By intertwining the celestial narratives of Shikasta with the contemporary struggles of Generation Z, we illuminate the timeless and interconnected nature of human experiences of home and belonging. Now, we endeavor to bridge the cosmic and the earthly realms together, inviting hence listeners or readers to contemplate the profound connections between a celestial odyssey in space and a multifaceted journey that we are undergoing as a modern generation, living and existing in the modern world, making Shikasta a work of art that defies time and space, and hence making Lesson an author that represents human struggle in every time and place. She is viewed henceforth as a prophetic figure who can foresee and foreshadow the upcoming, and henceforth she was able to echo an upcoming struggle for this generation. She attempts through her literature to portray humanity's decay and downfall, to eventually pave the way for our salvation or the correction of our fates. This facet of the author is portrayed through her protagonist, Jor, who has been throughout the novel the eyes of the blind and the ears of the deaf, who has taken all along the prophetical dimension of the author within the pages and tried to save the Shikastans, hence echoing the author's voice throughout the entire narrative. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope I was clear enough. Thank you very much, Miss. Thank you.
Hello,
Shipi, I
Ujjwal?
think Ujjwal is not available, so if you could continue.
Yeah. Since is Ilham there? If she's not, we will just move on to the next speaker from Bangladesh, Anisa Ishrat. Is Anisha here? She's here.
Yes,
Anisha,
yes.
if you could have your video on. Thank you so much, dear.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear. Nice.
Yes. Okay. So at first, I would like to thank everyone, and this is my first time that I'm going to read the paper, and the topic is on how Gen Z's read lesson. Sorry. So at first, I'd like to say something about Doris Lessing's work. And Doris Lessing's works, including To Room 19, hold enduring relevance for contemporary Bangladesh and resonate with Generation Z readers. Lessing's exploration of universal themes such as identity, societal norms, and individual struggles transcends time and culture, providing a mirror for young Bangladeshis navigating a changing society. As a Gen Z individual, I connect with Lessing's characters in their quests for autonomy and self-discovery, reflecting on shared human experiences. Doris Lessing's To Room 19 is an exploration of the complexities within the human psyche and constraints of societal expectations. This short story follows the life of Susan Rollins, a seemingly conventional woman whose internal struggles unravel in a powerful and tragic manner. Lessing skillfully dissects themes of identity, the societal rules imposed on individuals, and the consequences of suppressing one's true self. Room 19 serves as a thought-provoking narrative that delves into the profound depths of human emotions, making it a timeless piece that continues to resonate with readers, including those in contemporary Bangladesh as they grapple with issues of individuality and societal norms in their own lives. Doris Lessing's relevance to contemporary Bangladesh lies in the universality of the themes she explores in her works. Although her narratives often draw from her own experiences and the socio-political climate of her time, the fundamental human struggles and complexities she delves into are timeless. In the context of Bangladesh, where social, political, and cultural landscapes are continually evolving, Lessing's exploration of identity, societal structures, and the human condition remains pertinent. Bangladesh, like many other nations, is undergoing rapid changes, especially with the younger generation playing a significant role in shaping the future. Lessing's themes of individualism, self-discovery, and the questioning of established norms and power structures can resonate with contemporary Bangladeshi youth who are navigating their own paths in a changing society. As a member of Generation Z, relating to Lessing and her characters involves finding common grounds in the universal struggles depicted in her works. The quest for identity, the desire for autonomy, and the exploration of personal values are themes that transcend time and culture. In a globalized world where information is readily accessible, Gen Z individuals in Bangladesh can connect with Lessing's narratives, drawing parallels between the challenges faced by her characters and their own experiences. Gen Z readers engage with Doris Lessing's work with a fresh perspective, interpreting her writings through the lens of their own experiences and rapidly changing world around them. Lessing's exploration of complex social issues, identity, and human relationship resonates with the diverse and socially conscious mindset of Gen Z. In an era defined by digital connectivity and the sharing of ideas, Gen Z readers may approach Lessing's work with a collaborative spirit, discussing themes and characters across online platforms. The accessibility of information also allows them to delve into the historical and cultural context that influence Lessing's narratives, fostering a deeper understanding of her work. In summary, Gen Z engages with Doris Lessing's words by applying their unique perspectives, leveraging digital platforms for discussion, and drawing connections between her narratives and the present issues of their time. Lessing's timeless exploration of the human condition provides Gen Z with a literary landscape to navigate and interpret in their own evolving context. Thank you, everyone. That was my vision.
Thank you so much. We will go on to the Ujjal. Are we not getting across to Ujjal?
Don't seem to be able to.
You're muted, Ujjal.
No, she's
We
not.
can't hear you. We can't hear you.
She's already been asked.
Yes. Ujjal, for some reason we cannot hear you although you're speaking. So yes. while you figure that out, we'll go on to the next speaker, and maybe using a code or something like that might help. These things happen, no issues at all. We'll go on to the next person, which is Shanendu now. Shanendu, are you here? Could you unmute? Can we have the video on also, please? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We can't hear you, Sunundu.
Yes, you are audible.
Could I request everyone else to mute themselves, please? It will help because we are getting a feedback. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sharlindu. I think that he's raised a lot of new interesting points which we might take up later if we have time. But we'll take on the final speaker, which Shudipto. And Shudipto, if you see my hand going up or just the hand demo, then you know that you have to kind of wind up. Shudipto?
Sure, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, audible. Very much so. Visible too. Thank you so much.
Visible.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. So my warm regards to everyone, the dignitaries present here. So I will jump into my topic right away. I am dealing with translation of Lessing. So the first question that we should address today is, who are these Gen Zs? We will describe in terms of time and space, maybe. So these people are born in between the late 1990s and early 2010s, 2012, in fact. So therefore, as part of the global village and English being the lingua franca, the major question remains, should they at all wait for a suitable translation of this generation, which throughout is familiar with internet sources, should just go and read up Lessing in original? We'll refer to Benjamin's The Task of the Translator, where he questions the notion of a translation is meant for readers who do not understand the original. If one has read the original, would she be interested in reading the translated version or versions? For Benjamin, translation is a form and translatability depends on the term of the circle and the tangent, the original and the translated work. So for an author like Lessing, I believe she deserves to be translated into many, many languages. The question is still that how is Gen Z for a targeted readership? With the digital access, they can also find the translations to read and admire, which is supposed to be admired. Now, I started by defining Gen Zs in terms of time. It's time for space, irrespective of where they come from, a metro, a suburb, or a rural area, they share a space of commonality, where actually the Gen Z is happening. The space is digital, a virtual social media space, often offered for free to make its business upon the consumer capitalist model. Now, readers often unconsciously are consumers. So will they consume a Lessing translation? I think they are needed to be fed with a relatable content because, you know, all over Instagram, Facebook, X, Thread, everywhere, we have this culture of relatability where the Gen Zs are dying to comment on any post they find slightly relatable. Us, bro, us. So the stories I have taken up are Flight and Storms. They are based on very different kinds of spaces, as Xinghua Shao points out. The Doris Lessing works with this interplay between urban space and natural rural space. So in these two stories also, we find this interaction between these two spaces, but we belong to a common space, a digital home, and we have to go into our physical spaces, our real physical spaces, to find the comfort of relatability out of those stories. In the stories, we find many things remain silent, unspoken, and unheard of, including that influx, the psychological influx between inner emotions and outer expressions of the protagonist. Now, Henry Lefebvre, in his The Production of Space, confirms that no space is empty and they must have some meaning. The social space is not an abstract and objective thing, but a being of concrete social things. Now, in the urban space, we find kinds of power dynamics, and in turns, this space becomes a representative of social hierarchies. Whereas the natural rural space, on the other hand, has its own power dynamics too, but that mainly with the age factor. So on this kind of case study, these two stories fit directly very much. So in fact, with the thunderstorm and rains flooding away all the traces of natural space in the story storms, we find a direct conflict, a direct interplay between this urban space and the natural space. And if a translation of these two stories has to be powerful enough, impactful enough, they have to reproduce this kind of interactions and dichotomies. Now, to wind up, so what are there to be translated? Generation gap is there. There is time, history, space, and the tension between the generations. And of course, the language. Now, the deconstructionists will tell us that a culture is a narrative bereft of historical or physical origins. And the structuralists would say that culture is an interaction between different systems of science. So a word-to-word or a unit-to-unit translation, linguistic transfer is sought for, but how to make it relatable? And I highly doubt that Gen Z lingo is a thing in Indian or African vernaculars. All those IDKs, IYKYIMs, IYKYKs, the Delulus and the Celulus are all included in that English culture, the culture of the lingua franca. Should slangs finds its way into fruitful translations? I really need to question that. Moreover, the other factors apart from the language needs to be translated and transferred as such that the cultures that Lessing wanted to express remains there with all due respect, and still the translated result can find its way into the digital culture of relatability. So it's part of my limitation that I don't know many languages. There in this panel itself, I preferably would have referred to some English to Bengali translation possibilities, but I would not do that right now, but I am open to discussing things anytime after the panel ends or the program ends. So thank you from my end. Thanks a ton for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sudipto. That was really maintaining time, I would say. Although I know you had a lot to say. Is there anything that there are a lot of youngsters here? Some of them are youngsters who were presenting yesterday, like Tanmoy and Pahul. I think they have rejoined, and Samikha was also here. So is there anything you all would like to add? Sumedha is here. So if there is anything you would like to add, we will put the panel or the floor open for anybody else to say something. And already in the chat box, we had person called Sandesh Ben Ghazil. I'm not sure whether I'm getting the name pronunciation right. But he or she does write, "Hi everyone, my internet connection is very unstable. I can't turn on my mic, but as a Gen Z, I want to shed light on the fact that we are a very alienated generation indeed. Personally speaking, like mentioned above by Dr. Mahol, I was simply an adult since my earliest childhood. So it is see, we've been dealing with Lessing for so long. The moment we get to talk, we don't stop. So I will allow others the youngsters to come in with if they have anything to say. Maybe Pahul, maybe Tanmoy, if you all have anything to pitch in with, or maybe. Well, Tanmoy is typing. You can also tell us. So I think, and if the panelists themselves, if you all have anything to say. Yes, Tanmoy, right.
Well, I've really enjoyed all what they have said, especially Swarnendu, because actually, he has brought this whole new episode of Sufi and kind of, it's a new take actually, and so many things that we every day see, Sadhguru and Gaur Gopal and everything, the spirituality, the question of spirituality and the way he has, even if we don't talk about anyone specifically focusing on psychology and all that, we do feel that we have a need for something else, that super consciousness that he was talking about. We do feel it. We don't need a psychologist to come and tell us that we need this supra consciousness and all that. So this is something Lessing articulates in her own way. And well, I would ask if there, it's not a question actually, it's an observation, more of an observation that, well, then are we taking, I mean, Gen Z, are they taking spirituality? I mean, if we are taking if we are taking that, well, spirituality is something that, you know, some people are selling and all that, then are we taking it very lightly? I mean, very facetiously? That is what I'm trying to ask them. I mean, if Gen Zs are taking it, you know, on the one hand, they are saying it that it is self-transcending. Well, so it's giving them a space, so kind of to negotiate with their problems and everyday difficulties. And then on the other hand, they are saying that, well, Gen Zs think that this is something which we can sell, so they are sellable. So are we on the one hand taking it very seriously as something that gives us a space with reference to Lessing, and then at the same time we are saying that, well, it is something that people are selling around us? Then are we not contradicting ourselves somehow? That, you know, that's an observation. Of course, I would ask all the Gen Zs if they comment on
the young group who are here, other than Swarnendu, if there is anybody who would like to respond to that. Or if Swarnendu wishes to respond to that.
Yes, I would like to respond to that. It's a very brief thing. First of all, thank you, Tanmada, for the question. It's a very interesting observation. And I believe that, ma'am, Swati ma'am, you read a comment, like a person had read, like we are feeling alienated day by day. And it's a, like, sadly but true reality that I don't know about like what Gen, like Y or Gen X is talking, doing in this kind of a age of social media. But we Gen Zs are absolutely for sure we are alienated from the outer world itself. Like we are at our home and like continuously glued to the smartphone and whatnot. But the thing is that is the time when this idea of spirituality is sold. And I'm not claiming that Gen Z is selling spirituality, but it is that spirituality is sold to Gen Zs. Because there is lack of understanding of what spirituality is. And if you go and visit 5 channels, 5 influencers, they have all different definitions of spirituality and they have their own brand of spirituality. They are selling a particular thing. And that is a thing I asked, like, I'm not going into that realm, like what kind of spirituality is true or not, like more applicable or not. My idea is that there is a void. And that is why Gen Z is trying to find spirituality in a certain way of sense. And if we read Lessing's even prior works, like before the Sufi age or after like space fictions, the idea of Sufism or the idea of a prophetic or a visionary thing or a mysticism is there. But the manifestation got like the highest point, I think, in the early 1970s when she is writing the visionary fictions or the spiritual fictions, particularly.
Okay. Nuha wanted to come in there, so can we have her? Nuha wanted to say something in the same line. So I don't want to sound...
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that for an author like Doris Lessing, it should come as no surprise that the modern generation or Generation Z would still find home in her. Because some authors are so able to oversee and so able to overshadow that they become timeless. Like something I heard in yesterday's study day, it's like Doris Lessing is like the bard, it's like Shakespeare. People of all ages, of all times, of all countries and places still find home in Shakespeare and still study Shakespeare with the same passion for decades and generations. I think same goes for Doris Lessing. since she has managed to encompass the struggles and the struggles and the challenges of each and every generation, of each and every gender, of each and every population. She has managed to encompass the suffering of this generation before it even started to happen. She was able to overshadow that by the actions of the older generations. We are coming to this point. We will inevitably be here at some point, and here we are.
Okay, that's a valid point. I think that it is like that actually does great to what we believe in, that Lessing has been and continues to be for the next stages to come, for maybe. And Sudipta has something to say. Sudipta incidentally was involved, so was Swarnendu, in translating Lessing, which is why they are so keen on talking about translating her into a different culture. Sudipta, your point, please.
Yes, I had a question from Dr. Ujjaljit ma'am, and I would like to address that promptly. So, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, what ma'am asked, yes, we the Gen Zs, this is a question of temperament. We are constantly being served with shorter kind of fictions. Okay, there are longer films, there are longer web series, and we are having pieces out of those texts and are being fed as reels. We are quite attracted towards shorter fictions, shorter visual narratives. In fact, in the arena of literature, in every Penguin bookstalls, I can almost bet that there will be some copies of TTT books, TTT collections, Terribly Tiny Tales, some 30-40 words of microfictions printed inside the covers of a book. They were digital fictions. They were posted on Facebook and Instagram, and now they're being printed for general consumption. So yes, there will be novels translated, but the translators and the readership, the targeted readership, both being Gen Zs and us, we highly doubt that whether such novels in translation will be much famous, will be much favorite for us. We would rather look into the shorter kinds of fictions, a fiction that we can finish up in one sitting. Suppose we are traveling from one place to another, like Swarnendu or me, we travel every day for our work. So we would like to experience that kind of a translation work or original work that we can finish in one go, a buzz write, and we can finish a text. For a novel, that cannot happen. So the short stories, the non-fictions, they will gain more prominence with time, I think.
Okay, that is like we have moved on to the idea of genre here, and how and why perhaps Lessing has remained appealing to the Generation Z is what Sudipta is saying, that she also has these shorter fictions which can be translated and which can be read. So the reason why she's still relatable to a group of a different generation altogether. And Professor Ahmed Ahsanuzzahman had something to say. No, you're muted, sir. We will.
Well, I fully agree with Sudipta. That is, people tend to read shorter fiction these days. And a good comparative example could be, cricket matches. Those of us who belong to the older generations began watching test matches. And then came one dayers. Then you have T20, and now you have also hundreds. So you see, people don't have much time. And even these days, plays, performances do not last more than 1.5 hours. It used to be 3 hours or so. And Hindi films, of course. But if you look at Bengali films, well, not more than 2 hours these days. So people tend to read smaller fiction. They also don't have much time to watch, cricket matches that last 5 days or so. So that's a good point you mentioned, Sudipto. And also when you are talking about translation or Gen Z's approach towards translation and the language, or language shapes, what happens in different cultures, things like that. Well, instantly a good example came to my mind. My daughter's, my elder daughter, she is a master's student in Dhaka University. So, a couple of years back, she was, using this word called para. So I couldn't really connect. What is that? So she would be always using this word. And her younger sister, she's in grade 10, they would exchange these words, para, things like that. They would, and then I realized one day she told me, Baba, para niuna. Father, don't take para. Then I understood that is something that you should be troubled much. Or, let us have it in our own way. So this is frankly how Generation G can connect themselves. That is, they have different set of vocabulary as well. And this is, if translation can accommodate, I hope Sudipta has done that. It was difficult. It is difficult to translate, Desi, and also it's difficult to communicate listening to other readers in translation. So if the target audience belongs to Gen Z, then we need to keep in mind that they have different vocabulary so that they can communicate. So that was an observation.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
and it seems like we have more comments coming in. However, on the note that both Gen X, or before that, is there a UVW to which we belong? I don't know. Has agreed with Gen Z. Let's keep to this plane of being in agreement and call it a day and go on to the final part of the final section of the webinar, which would be a vote of thanks from Buthaina. But before that, we have Professor Jyotsna Rege with us, and may I request Buthaina to introduce Jyotsna and go on to the valedictory session?
Okay.
Buthaina here?
Yes, I'm here. I can see you. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you, Swati. It was amazing. I immersed into the Gen Z slay generation, let me use their words. Thank you, Jyotsna, for being here, for joining us, but also for allowing us to be part of this journey. I don't know if I am going to succeed to give tribute to Jyotsna. She's the president of Doris Lessing Society. I don't have a bio, but I can say that she contributed massively to preserving that heritage and to keeping us gathered around Lessing. And I cannot find words to thank her for allowing me to open a chapter in North Africa and for trusting me. And I would like to thank you as well, because preserving this chapter pushed me as a researcher to finish my PhD, because I relied on the works of so many. It's been long ago, it's 2016, but the journey started with Doris Lessing Society. I found a lot of articles and books, and thanks to every member who contributed to every single chapter published and book, I had the chance of finishing my PhD, and now I'm transmitting this to my generation. So Jyotsna, that heavy heritage, I think is preserved thanks to you and to all Doris Lessing Society members. So Professor Jyotsna, we will be honored if you say a few words with this, you share your ideas with this new generation. That's we're honored. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Buthaina. I just also just want to, before I start, just to say that it's not a question of being allowed to start a chapter. I mean, the honor is mine, the honor is for the society, that there is the energy and interest around the world. And we're so delighted that you've started the North Africa chapter. So good evening. For me, it's morning, everybody. What an enjoyable webinar full of energy and experimentation. I couldn't watch the program live yesterday, so I caught up on it via YouTube in the middle of the night, my night. On the Google Meet alone, we had some 25, 30 people each day and still more on YouTube. Participation by 30 plus people from 7 different countries in a collaboration between 2 chapters of the Doris Lessing Society. Fantastic. The chosen theme, the quest for home, has been so rich, so deeply gendered, both refuge and prison, and as presenters have reminded us, a site of violence, surveillance, patriarchal normativity, domestic terror, and also a utopia longed for in exile. It is an ideal theme for delving into the work of Doris Lessing and other women writers, as women have traditionally had such a fraught and contradictory relationship with home, even though home has been designated, or perhaps because home has been designated as their sphere. Not far from everyone's thoughts throughout this webinar has been the current tragedy of destruction and displacement unfolding in Israel, Palestine, where innocents are being slaughtered in their safe places, forced to move on again and again, and taught in the most brutal of fashions that no place is safe. For refugees and diasporic populations, home is a site of memory and nostalgia reconstructed in the imagination. But home is not only an idea, home is also a real place. We long for an end to the killing and for the multiply displaced people of Israel, Palestine to find home at last. I'm the current soon-to-be outgoing president of Doris Lessing Society, which was founded nearly 50 years ago by young, mostly female scholars, mostly in the United States and Canada. In recent years, the society has steadily become more international. That is such a welcome thing. Today, most of our new members are from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Hearty congratulations to Doris Lessing Society North Africa, the most recently formed chapter. This webinar is its launch event. Buthaina, you did it. Wishing you all the best as you continue to deepen and widen your membership and networks. The best new development in the Doris Lessing Society in the past 2 years has been the formation of chapters, starting with the DLS South Asia in 2022. Such a prolific group. Next, DLS North Africa, and very soon DLS China. Yesterday, I sat in and spoke at the opening session of the symposium that is being held at Hunan Normal University. And with 50 participants there and something like 85 sessions, really inspiring too. What a tribute to Lessing at her 10th anniversary of her death. These chapters jumpstart what we've been trying to do for some time, that is to read Lessing in comparative contexts. This is precisely what we have seen over the course of this webinar, with papers examining works by 3 generations of female writers in conjunction with works by Lessing. Another standout element of this webinar has been the engagement with Lessing's work by younger scholars, and in interesting formats, such as 2 people presenting together, and the articulate Gen Z Reads Lessing panel. What a delight to see students from Tunisia, Bangladesh, and India interacting in this way across countries and continents. You are the future of Doris Lessing studies, so we'll be increasingly looking to you for your insights and ideas about how best to move forward. Congratulations to the hosts and organizers, Swati Mitra of DLSSA, Buthaina Majul of DLSNA, and Chandravat Chakravarti of the CSGCM, I love acronyms, for pulling together this ambitious program. And thanks to the stalwart members of DLSSA who graciously offered introductory remarks and chaired sessions, Professor Ahmad Asanuzaman, Ratna Raman, Ujjaljit, Sajish Vapala. Special thanks to Radha Chakravarti, who, as this chapter's mentor, offers reassuring support and wise guidance. We look forward with anticipation to the upcoming special issue of our scholarly journal, Doris Lessing Studies, being guest edited by DLSSA. A heads up, as many of you know, the Doris Lessing Society organizes at least one session at the annual convention of the Modern Language Association. This year, our session is entitled The Figure of the Griot in Doris Lessing and African and Post-Colonial Diaspora Writers, in which we'll also be reading Lessing in a shared frame with other writers. Because the MLA conventions are always held in North Africa and the costs of, North America, and the costs of membership and registration and conference travel are out of reach for many Doris Lessing members outside of North Africa, in order to keep the Society's activities accessible to all members, since the COVID pandemic, we've been reprising our MLA session at our annual business meeting held over Zoom, and 2024 will be no exception. So please save the date, Sunday, 7th of January, 2024, and we'll give you confirmation and details as soon as they're available. Finally, in remembrance and gratitude, I will be lighting a candle for Doris Lessing on this 10th anniversary of her death. And thinking about her and her work and us all who are here on this earth, on this broken planet, carrying on bravely as she's guided us to do. Thank you for inviting me to give these brief closing remarks. And now let me turn over to Buthaina.
Jyotsna, thank you. Thank you so much, Jyotsna, for these moving words. When I started reading...
I think Robin had raised her hand, and Robin is here.
Please, see her on my...
Secretary. Yes.
Please. Robin, you're here?
Robin is here, yes.
Could you activate your mic, please?
Actually, I pressed it accidentally, but thank you so much. I will catch up with everything on YouTube, and let me remind everyone that we'll be having a student essay contest, and I will send that out today, that information. And those who participated in this webinar will be invited to contribute their work. So thank you to everyone, and greetings from me in California right now. Very inspiring.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time to join us. When I started reading Doris Lessing's works, my experience of reading itself changed, and I found home in those shores of sweet unreasons. Lessing was a self-taught woman who refused all kinds of conformism, all forms of indoctrination or social molding. She left school at the age of 14 and started the journey of reading. She once asserted that the best education is a good library, and here we are reading her books and learning from her. She believed in the capacity of fiction to blur the boundaries of between space and time and reach readers everywhere. And here we are reading her texts and writing about her from different parts of the world and joined by different generations. From a storyteller to a humanist, Lessing becomes what she calls, in a small personal voice, an architect of the soul. Indeed, she thinks, I'm quoting her, once a writer has a feeling of responsibility as a human being for the other human beings he influences, it seems to me he must become a humanist and must feel himself as an instrument of change. The act of getting a story or a novel published is an act of communication, an attempt to impose one's personality and beliefs on other people. She metamorphosed the role of the writer into a humanitarian historiographer forever. For her, home is not physical. It is rather that inner jungle inside every one of us. Lessing died in 2013 at the age of 94, leaving behind a valuable and incredible literary heritage. We give her tribute today. Heartfelt thanks, Doris Lessing, for giving what could never be taken. I'm using Cher's words. I would like to thank Doris Lessing Society's founders and members for creating a hub of exchange open to the world. I couldn't have done my PhD without their valuable contribution to the literature. Words are not enough to thank the president of Doris Lessing Society, Professor Josna Reje, for pushing DLS studies forward and trusting us, me and my colleagues and students with North Africa chapter. I had the chance to have a guardian angel all along the process, Dr. Swati Mirta, whose passion for Lessing and literature keep inspiring me every day. Thank you, Swati, for being you and for putting all this together and making it happen, you and your team. I'm truly grateful and proud of this collaboration. Thank you, North Africa chapter members who participated and joined, and mainly Dr. Hanan Baroumi, my friend and collaborator, and Wided Dashrawi, amongst others who were not able to join but are part of the research group. I would like to thank my dear friend and collaborator, Professor Elisabetta Marino, for accepting to be part of the conference and delivering a special lecture from a special person. I also thank my students, Nuhe, who is defending her thesis very, very soon on Lessing, Mamoun, Siwar, Amal, Farah, Dorra, and all those who joined. Thanks to all the participants from both chapters for their thought-provocative talks. I learned a lot during these 2 days. I would like to thank our guests and mainly Professor Cheng, and we wish China and the China chapter all the best. I'm pretty sure we'll collaborate soon. Swati will be preparing something, I'm pretty sure. I feel like we succeeded, Swati, in creating a home of our own yesterday and today. More to come with Lessing, I'm pretty sure. To you, Swati, thank you for everything.
And this has to come to an end. And while Josna talks about lighting a candle, and we have everyone more or less here, I don't know whether before the internet crashes, can everyone just turn on their videos if possible? Maybe it will crash, but then we'll crash out together. So let's have the videos on, and then we can... Adrija behind the scene can take a screenshot of whichever faces that show. No? Radha, the Ratna, Sadesh is here. The students, the Instagram rich students are shy of camera. That's nice.
What about Ujjal? Ujjal's video is...
Ujjal, your video will work. Amit Sanu Zaman, it's late for him.
Yes,
Let's have all the videos. Yes, thank you so much. Ujjal, let's have your video. All of you, let's have the videos on, if possible, especially the panelists. Shanindu, Shumedha, Shudipto, all of you, if you can have, then we'll have one full screen. No, I think it's not. Maybe it's not working.
I think Ujjal's is not working. Maybe, yes.
Maybe so many videos are not working in the bandwidth that we have. We'll keep that for whenever, whichever in generation alpha, beta, gamma, when we meet in person, and we might have a webinar again in person sometime somewhere. But till then, it's going to be a very good night. Very, very enriching 2 days. We had some brilliant paper, one from the lady here on screen, Professor Baroumi, Henani is how we'll get, and Professor Elisabetta. That was a wonderful take. I never could figure out the Black Madonna that way. The lady who has kind of seared us through the different chapters, just now on screen. Robin also pushing us, supporting us behind the scene. And yes, but I think the cake goes to the young group which have joined, and it's a trend that we saw from the very beginning of the first webinar that we had. The technical team is young, students, ex-students who are now joining the force as educators will carry it all with them. So yes, a big hand to everyone. And Butana has gone off. She is in France. She's a real
I'm
time
here.
zone traveler.
Oh, there you
She is really traveling time and spaces. So
She's here
lovely
just
to-
now.
Yes, and there she is. She's called herself a witch, so she's going to kind of do some kind of squashing of some of a
Thank you,
wand
Radha,
and
for
creating more
taking-
magic. So yes, we have it all. We have it all. Thank you, Radhidi, if you're still here, for guiding us through. And if there's anybody I am missing out, please understand you're there very much in our thoughts, and it would have not been possible without your valuable addition to the 2 days of proceedings. And
Thank you for all the hard work, Swati. I mean, someone needs to thank you as well.
oh, thank you so much for that. And I was just about to say there is Chandrabadi here.
Yes, and I
she-
think the technical team, they have
Yes,
been
the
supporting
technical
all the
team is the
CSGM.
one.
Yes, CSGM
Absolutely.
programs.
We have
And
been
this one also.
Yeah, so a big thanks to them and a big clap to them. And yeah, but Ratna, I know I do all the hard work, but the person who drives me is this lady here. We come off the same group from the same mentor, as it were, a PhD guide. And she's the one who would just drop a line and say, "Are you getting anywhere?" And so, I have to kind of run and get the things done. So, yes. Thanks. And I think there are going to be a lot of intersection on Lessing, a lot of new ideas which will, of course, Buthaina, you and I, we have forgotten. All this will go into a proceeding, and Buthaina said, even when we were thinking about the title, it's going to be a book, Swati, it's going to be a book. So it's going to be a book. We will send out the emails. We have the full papers of most of them, but I'm sure they would like to revise, reconsider, reframe. So we will get a book done, but first I need to get that special issue off our head and chest before we go into the proceedings while the others go on. So yes, that is how it is going to be. We will leave in the middle of this chaos that we have wonderfully created of all the generations and all the Lessing readings and all world literature put together. And thank you, everyone, and a very good night and a very happy day. Those who are watching the day.
Swati, could you share the link again so that they add their emails to receive their certificates?
yes.
Could you share it again in the chat, please?
Yeah. So before we move off, most of them have registered, and just for a final moment, in case we have missed anybody out. So here it goes, the registration for day 2. And while I'm at it, I really like listening to, that's day 2, that's, me doing a shift over. I just like listening to mentors and advisors, having no idea of my own maybe. That is why. So I did get some of my students to take down the notes for a final report report that hopefully we will send across and share with everyone out here and to DLS as well, because they make good reading. And students like Arunima and Ria and Ratna have been at it. Arunima was up all night to get it all done. So yes, we are trying to rope in the young group as much as we can. As you see, while we are talking about future projects, let me also think that if we make time before semester ends and all that, we may have a reading group meeting as we have done before, with more youngsters in the group now, and across borders. I think we can have an interesting reading yet again. So on that note, while the people who have joined in late, if you could fill out, just copy that registration link and fill it out for us. Then we will have the necessary email IDs and your names and designation before we can send out those very valuable certificates, which are nowadays they are very valuable, it seems. But I think you are, although this might go into memory, I hope this session and these 2 days will also remain very differently valued for you. And Ratna, we will have the last word from you.
No, I was simply going to say that this registration thing is very tricky, especially if you don't belong to Generation Next, because every time you switch it and fill up the form, it says you can sign once more. So every time I do that, I keep thinking, oh, Buthina's put up one, Swati's put up another. So should I just keep signing these while it keeps telling me you can fill in one more option?
Ratna, it's not for you.
I know. I'm simply telling you. I began by saying, since I'm not Generation Next. But see,
it's not for you.
This is what happens when dinosaurs come on.
It's all right. And as long as you're not spitting fire, it's fine. We don't mind.
On Swati, you've got all confused. It's dragons that spit fire.
Oh, yeah. True. Yeah, it's all right. I was very bad with it, in any case.
Yeah, but this has been wonderful. And I'm just so glad that I know all of you.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Yes. So I think Lessing would have had something extremely sarky to say about this. Like, oh my God, you people can gather and waste so much time.
Yeah, she'd probably say, go get a life.
Yeah.
Sing me, but I mean, that's less. And we were listening to her anyway when she said, don't work on my books for your research.
Yeah, that's what she has been saying. So good, yeah. Very valid points. But you know something, this is online. We are not serving dinner or lunch. So we have to call it a day or a night. And so we will do a in-person thing. And Buthana is going to come down.
Swati, maybe if this is what I do whenever I have an online class, is to ask everybody to open their mics at the same time, to do a lot of noise to say goodbye. It will be great.
Shall we put on our torches? It'll be like lighting a candle.
Yeah, exactly.
Goodbye.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah, thank you, Ratna.
Okay, I'll tell you what, since we are on and others cannot come in, I think we will switch off our videos now and we will see whether the others are shown. So we've got a...
This is like the candle for a second.
Okay, here you are.
Right.
And Nuha,
where's your candle?
The candle, yeah.
I'm trying to take a picture. Just Swati, remove it a little bit from your head. Let me take a picture.
Right.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. So can we just, I'm switching off the video so that somebody else can come.
Sure.
Can somebody else switch on their videos in that case? maybe the bandwidth will accommodate. No. Okay.
There seems to be no takers.
No. It's a different end. It's all right. We are the oldies and we will talk.
There we are.
Okay.
Amazing.
Just to the noise.
Okay.
What do you want us to do? Yodel? Jolly good.
Yeah.
So should we say goodbye all together?
Yeah. Maybe 1, 2, 3.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you all again.
Have a wonderful day or evening or night.
That's great.